My wife begged me not to come her office party. My friends are honestly embarrassed for me when I bring you around. She said over sushi. I paid for my half and never spoke to her again. Now her friends watch me thrive while she spirals. If there's one thing I've learned in my 29 years of stumbling through this circus we call life, it's this absolute gem of wisdom. When your wife begs you not to show up somewhere, it's not because she's planning some elaborate surprise party with sparklers and a cake shaped like your face. No, it's because she's actually embarrassed of you, and she's doing you the courtesy of spelling it out in the most soul-crushing way possible while you're literally sitting across from her at dinner. Her name was Sabrina, my wife of 3 gloriously delusional years, corporate marketing queen who could sell ice to penguins, self-proclaimed socialite who thought having 5,000 Instagram followers made her basically Beyoncé, and part-time humility assassin who could destroy your self-esteem with the precision of a surgeon and the empathy of a parking meter. She had this way of making you feel like you'd won the lottery and simultaneously like you were the janitor cleaning up after the real winners. It was a special talent, really, one that should probably be studied by psychologists and maybe weaponized by the military. Her office was throwing this big networking gala. You know, the kind of event where people pretend to love each other while silently competing for who has the bigger LinkedIn following, the shinier business card, or the most obnoxiously pretentious job title. Chief Synergy Officer, or whatever the hell that means. These were the kinds of gatherings where everyone sipped wine that cost more than my car payment and talked about disrupting industries, when really they just meant making an app that does what another app already does, but with a different color scheme. I was actually ready to go, and I mean genuinely excited in that puppy dog husband way that makes you cringe when you look back on it. I had my suit ironed to perfection, not a wrinkle in sight. Shoes polished so well I could see my increasingly questionable life choices reflected in them, and my heart stupidly, tragically loyal like some golden retriever who keeps bringing the ball back even after you've thrown it into traffic. I thought, hey, this is what supportive husbands do. They show up. They smile. They make small talk about quarterly projections and pretend to understand what synergy actually means. But then she grabbed my arm, right there in our bedroom as I was adjusting my tie, and she looked at me with those perfectly mascaraed eyes and whispered in that tone that somehow managed to be both sweet and absolutely devastating. Please, Noah, don't come. My friends are honestly embarrassed for me when I bring you around. Embarrassed. That was the word she chose. Not, they don't get your humor, or you're too good for them, or literally anything that wouldn't make me feel like I was a lost intern who accidentally wandered into a rich people convention wearing a name tag that said, "Hi, I'm poor and boring." Just straight up embarrassed. Like I was her dirty little secret, except instead of being scandalous and exciting, I was just disappointing. A participation trophy she had to display but really wanted to shove in a closet. I stood there for a moment, tie half knotted, brain doing that thing where it tries to process information that doesn't quite compute, like when you're watching a plot twist in a movie, but it's your actual life, and there's no rewind button. I wanted to say something clever, something cutting, something that would make her realize what an absolutely unhinged thing that was to say to your husband. But instead, I just felt this weird calmness wash over me. The kind of calm you get when you finally understand something you've been denying for way too long. So I did what any self-respecting husband would do in that moment. I nodded calmly, my face probably looking like I was accepting a package delivery rather than having my marriage implode in real time. I finished getting dressed. We drove to her favorite sushi restaurant in complete silence, the kind of silence where you can hear every thought screaming in your head. We sat down at one of those minimalist tables that cost more than most people's furniture, ordered our usual rolls, and made the kind of painful small talk that people make when they both know something fundamental has shattered, but they're still pretending everything's fine. When the bill came, I did something I'd never done in our entire relationship. I paid for exactly my half. Not the whole thing like I usually did because I was the man or whatever outdated notion I'd been operating under. Not even a penny more. I calculated my portion down to the California roll, left my cash on the table with the precision of an accountant settling a business transaction, and made a mental vow right then and there to never speak to her again unless absolutely legally necessary. She looked confused, actually had the audacity to look confused, like this was somehow surprising behavior from the man she'd just told her friends were embarrassed by. "Noah," she said, her voice doing that little upturned thing that used to make me melt, but now just made me tired. I smiled. Not a real smile, but that polite customer service smile you give to people you're done with, and said, "Thanks for dinner, Sabrina. I think I'll skip the gala. Wouldn't want to embarrass you." The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life, and when I walked into our apartment, the one I'd been paying most of the rent for while she built her brand, I realized something profound and incredibly obvious that I should have figured out approximately 3 years earlier. I had been married to someone who saw me as an accessory that didn't match her outfit anymore. Not a partner, not a teammate, just a boring, stable, embarrassing accessory that she'd outgrown now that she had fancy work friends and networking galas. I sat on our couch, the one we'd picked out together during happier times when I still thought we meant something, and I didn't cry or throw things or do any of the dramatic stuff you see in movies. I just sat there feeling this weird mixture of relief and sadness, like I'd finally been given permission to admit what I'd known deep down for months. This marriage was a scam, and I'd been the Mark. The loyal, stable, boring Mark who paid the bills and ironed his suit, and thought that's what love looked like. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "You're being really immature about this." I stared at it for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, composing and deleting a dozen responses that ranged from eloquent to profane. But finally, I just turned off my phone, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and toasted to myself in the empty apartment. "Here's to stability," I said out loud to nobody. "May it bore someone else to death." That night, lying in bed alone while she was presumably at her gala impressing all her friends with my convenient absence, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not some revenge plot or grand gesture. Just a simple decision to start giving the same energy I'd been giving to propping up Sabrina's life to actually building my own. To stop being embarrassed of being stable and start being proud of being real. Because here's what Sabrina and her champagne-sipping, business card collecting friends didn't understand. Stability isn't boring. Stability is what you build a life on. And while they were all out there chasing the next big thing, the next impressive title, the next person to make them look good at parties, I was going to chase something way more radical. I was going to chase being genuinely happy with someone who actually wanted me there. But first, I needed to figure out how to unfuck my life. And that, as it turns out, would be the easiest part. Let's rewind the tape here, back to a time when I had significantly more hair, significantly less wisdom, and the kind of optimism that only exists in 23-year-old guys who think they've figured out life because they landed an entry-level IT job with dental benefits. This is the part of the story where I explain how I went from a reasonably intelligent college graduate to a guy who willingly signed up to be someone's emotional support ATM for 3 years. Buckle up, because this origin story is less superhero and more cautionary tale that should be played in high schools as a warning. Sabrina and I met in college, specifically in one of those massive lecture halls where 200 students pretend to take notes while actually online shopping or playing phone games. She was sitting 3 rows ahead of me in Marketing 301, which I was only taking because I needed an elective and it fit perfectly between my actually useful computer science classes. She was all charm and charisma, wielding eyeliner like war paint and ambition like a weapon she was just learning to use. I was an IT consultant in training who genuinely thought networking meant fixing someone's Wi-Fi router and maybe eating pizza in the server room if you were lucky. Our first real conversation happened after she dropped her phone and the screen absolutely shattered into a spider web of regret and Apple Care claims. I helped her back up her photos to the cloud, which apparently made me her personal tech savior and, in her words, literally the sweetest guy I've ever met. Looking back, the bar was so low it was basically a tripping hazard, but at the time I felt like I'd won the lottery. Here was this gorgeous, confident woman who laughed at my terrible jokes and said she loved that I was so grounded and real, not like these other fake college guys. I didn't realize that grounded was code for convenient placeholder boyfriend who won't interfere with my influencer fantasies. I thought grounded was a compliment, like being called solid or dependable. Turns out, in Sabrina's personal dictionary, grounded meant about as exciting as beige wallpaper in a dentist's waiting room, useful for filling space, but not something you'd ever actually brag about. We dated through senior year, and honestly, it was pretty great at first. She was funny, driven, always had some new project or idea she was working on. I was supportive, showed up to her presentations, hyped up her Instagram posts before I even understood what engagement rates were. When graduation hit, we moved in together in this cramped apartment that cost way too much because it was in the trendy part of town, which really just meant there was a coffee shop that charged $8 for oat milk lattes and a vintage store that sold used flannel for the price of a car payment. That's when things started getting interesting. And by interesting, I mean I should have seen the red flags, but I was too busy being in love and also colorblind to warning signs. Sabrina was working at a boutique marketing agency, one of those places with exposed brick and motivational quotes on the walls like "hustle beats talent" and "good vibes only," which is corporate speak for "we pay you in experience" and LaCroix. Then she lost her job. Budget cuts, they said, but really it was because she spent more time curating her personal brand than actually working on client campaigns. She came home crying, mascara running, the whole devastating scene, and I did what any supportive boyfriend turned fiancé would do. I told her it was going to be okay, that we'd figure it out together, that this was just a minor setback in her obviously brilliant career trajectory. What I meant was, take a week to feel your feelings, update your resume, and start applying to new positions. What she heard was, finance my entire lifestyle indefinitely while I discover myself. I paid her rent, and I mean all of it, not just my half. I paid for groceries, utilities, that ridiculously expensive oat milk she insisted was the only kind that didn't upset her stomach. I bought her online courses, those $200 webinars about personal branding and social media growth hacking that were basically just someone reading a blog post at you for 6 hours. I even turned down a promotion that would have moved us across the country, a genuine career-changing opportunity that would have doubled my salary and put me on an actual path to senior management. Why did I turn it down? Because she grabbed my hands, looked at me with those big, sincere eyes that I now realize were probably calculating her next move, and said, "Babe, I need you here to build my brand. I'm so close to breaking through. If you leave now, everything I've worked for falls apart. Don't you believe in us?" Build her brand. I should have known right then that I was investing in a pyramid scheme called Sabrina's Ego Incorporated, where I was the only investor and she was somehow both the CEO and the product. But no, I bought into it completely, told my boss I couldn't take the position, and stayed put in our expensive, trendy apartment while she posted aesthetic photos on Instagram about grinding and manifesting abundance, while I literally paid for the avocado toast she photographed. Months went by, and her brand building looked a lot like sleeping until noon, spending 3 hours getting the lighting right for a single photo of her morning coffee, and occasionally attending networking events where she collected business cards like Pokemon cards, but never actually followed up with anyone. Meanwhile, I was working 50-hour weeks, coming home exhausted, and still somehow finding energy to be supportive and encouraging because that's what partners do, right? Wrong. That's what suckers do. Partners support each other. What I was doing was enabling someone who had confused ambition with entitlement and somehow convinced me that my stability was the foundation she needed to build her empire on. Except she wasn't building anything except a really impressive collection of ring lights and a following of bots she definitely paid for, but swore were organic. I remember one night, about a year into this arrangement, I was doing our taxes and realized I'd paid for literally everything for 12 straight months. Every single expense. Her contribution to our household was her presence and occasional motivational speeches about how we were both going to make it big, just in different ways. She was going to be a marketing influencer, and I was going to be, well, she never really finished that sentence because my role was already defined, the wallet. But here's the thing about being in deep, about being invested emotionally and financially, and having built your entire life around someone. You don't just wake up one day and see clearly. It's gradual, like those optical illusions where you can see either a vase or two faces, and once someone points out what you're supposed to see, you can't unsee it. Except nobody was pointing it out to me because all my friends had slowly drifted away, probably tired of hearing me make excuses for why Sabrina couldn't contribute to dinner or why we couldn't go on that trip we'd planned because she needed new equipment for her content creation. I was isolated, financially drained, and convinced that this was just what love looked like when you were with someone ambitious and special. That sacrifice was romantic. That struggle was just part of the journey. that eventually it would all pay off and we'd laugh about these lean years from our future mansion that her influencer empire would buy. Spoiler alert, the only thing that paid off was my student loan interest because I was too busy funding someone else's fantasy to actually invest in my own future. I should have seen it coming, should have recognized that someone who needs you to stay small so they can feel big isn't building you up, they're standing on your shoulders and calling it success. But love makes you stupid, and hope makes you stubborn, and the combination makes you the perfect mark for someone who's more interested in what you can do for them than who you actually are. I thought I was being a supportive partner. Turns out, I was just being used, and I'd paid premium price for the privilege. The fairy tale I thought we were living was actually a scam, and I was the only one who didn't realize I was being conned. But hey, at least I learned a valuable lesson. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time, not 3 years and several $1,000s later when they finally say it out loud at a sushi restaurant. At first, the digs were subtle, the kind of comments that you could almost convince yourself were helpful suggestions from a caring partner who just wanted you to be your best self. You know, the kind of feedback that comes wrapped in a smile and delivered with just enough sweetness that you can't quite tell if you're being insulted or improved. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, except the paper is made of passive-aggressive concern and the cuts are aimed directly at your self-esteem. It started with appearance, because of course it did. You should dress sharper, she'd say while scrolling through Instagram photos of her friends' husbands who apparently all shopped exclusively at stores where a single shirt cost more than my entire wardrobe. She'd show me pictures of guys in perfectly tailored suits, designer watches catching the light just right, pocket squares folded with the precision of origami masters. See how put together Marcus looks? That's the kind of energy you should be bringing. Energy. She was talking about clothes like they were a personality trait, like wearing a $2,000 suit would somehow transform me from an IT consultant into whatever fantasy version of a husband she'd cooked up in her head. I wanted to point out that Marcus worked in finance and probably spent more on dry cleaning than I spent on food, but that would have been defensive, which was another thing I apparently needed to work on. Then came the ambition comments, my personal favorite category of constructive criticism. My friends' husbands are all so ambitious, she'd sigh. Usually while we were doing something completely normal, like watching TV or eating dinner. Not even fancy dinner, just regular Tuesday night pasta. And she'd just drop that little grenade into the conversation like she was commenting on the weather. Trevor just got promoted to VP. Diane's husband Marcus started his own consulting firm. Even Jess's boyfriend is launching some crypto thing. Ah yes, because nothing says true love like constantly comparing your partner to other people's highlight reels. I'd sit there, fork halfway to my mouth, wondering what the appropriate response was to being told I wasn't ambitious enough. Should I apologize for having a stable job with benefits? Should I start a crypto scam just to keep up with the Joneses? Or in this case, the Marcuses and Trevors of Sabrina's aspirational friend group? Maybe try being more confident, she suggested one morning, as if confidence was something you could just download like an app update. This gem came after I'd apparently embarrassed her at some gallery opening by admitting I didn't understand modern art. Excuse me for not pretending that 3 red lines on a white canvas was a profound statement about the human condition. I thought honesty was a virtue, but apparently in Sabrina's world, faking sophistication was more important than being genuine. Noah works in IT, Sabrina would say when someone inevitably asked what I did. And I swear she said it the same way you'd say Noah collects bottle caps or Noah enjoys watching paint dry. No elaboration, no mention that I actually had a pretty solid position at a reputable company, just IT delivered with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. Meanwhile, Trevor the VP would launch into some story about closing a major deal, complete with hand gestures and dramatic pauses, and everyone would lean in like he was revealing the secrets of the universe instead of just describing a normal work thing that he'd inflated into an epic saga. Marcus would chime in about his consulting firm's latest client, name-dropping companies like he was collecting Pokemon cards. And I'd just sit there, eating my overpriced eggs, wondering what I was supposed to contribute to this conversation. The worst part wasn't even the conversations themselves, it was the looks. Her friends would glance at me with this mixture of pity and curiosity, like I was an interesting specimen they were studying. "How's work going, Noah?" they'd ask, but not in a way that suggested they actually cared about the answer. It was more like they were giving me a chance to say something impressive, and when I'd give a normal response about projects and deadlines, I could literally see their interest die in real time. They'd laugh too loudly at each other's jokes, the kind of performative laughter that's more about showing you're in on it than actually finding something funny. They'd sip their $18 cocktails, these elaborate drinks with names like the Bourgeois Mule or Cucumber Clarity, and discuss their next vacation like they were planning a diplomatic mission. We're thinking Tulum, but it's gotten so commercial. Maybe Croatia? Meanwhile, I just wanted fries, regular fries, not truffle fries or sweet potato fries with aioli, just normal fries that didn't cost more than a full meal anywhere else. Sabrina would touch my arm occasionally. These little performative gestures of affection that were more about showing her friends she had a husband than actually connecting with me. I was a prop in her life, the stable, boring husband who showed up and smiled and was supposed to be grateful for the privilege of sitting at the cool kids' table, even though the cool kids clearly wished I'd sit somewhere else. Her friends looked at me like I was the unpaid intern of her marriage, someone who was there out of necessity rather than choice, someone who hadn't quite earned his place but was being tolerated anyway. And maybe that's exactly what I was, because I kept showing up, kept trying to fit in, kept hoping that eventually I'd figure out the secret code that would make me acceptable to these people who valued appearance over authenticity and status over substance. I should have known then that this wasn't going to work, that you can't build a real relationship with someone who's embarrassed by reality and only interested in the fantasy version of life she'd constructed in her head. But I was still trying, still hoping, still believing that if I just improved enough, changed enough, became impressive enough, everything would click into place and she'd finally see me the way I saw her. Spoiler, that's not how any of this works. Then came the night that would go down in my personal history as the moment I finally grew a backbone and realized that love shouldn't require you to shrink yourself into something unrecognizable just to fit into someone else's aspirational Pinterest board of a life. It was a Thursday, which feels important somehow, like the universe chose the most boring weekday possible to deliver my wake-up call. Not a dramatic Saturday or a contemplative Sunday, just regular old Thursday, the day nobody ever writes songs about. She picked a sushi restaurant, and not just any sushi restaurant, but one of those places so fancy it looked like a jewelry store had a baby with a fish tank and then hired a minimalist architect to design the nursery. Everything was black marble and soft lighting, with those private booths that cost extra and probably came with a complimentary lecture on the proper way to appreciate raw fish. The kind of place where the menu didn't have prices because if you had to ask, you clearly didn't belong there, except they did have prices and they were absolutely astronomical. We sat down in one of those booths, surrounded by couples who all looked like they were on first dates funded by venture capital. Everyone dressed like they'd just come from closing million-dollar deals, or at least wanted everyone to think they had. The waiter brought us hot towels with actual tongs, like our hands were too precious to touch regular napkins, and presented us with a menu that read like a novel written entirely in Japanese with English subtitles that didn't really help. Sabrina ordered for both of us without asking, which she'd started doing recently as part of her whole sophisticated woman who knows what she wants persona. She rattled off a list of rolls and sashimi that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, smiling at the waiter like she did this every day, like dropping $200 on dinner was just a casual Thursday activity for people like us. Except there was no us in that financial reality. There was just me, quietly calculating how many overtime hours this meal was going to cost. Halfway through dinner, right after the waiter brought out some elaborate dish that looked more like modern art than food, she sighed. It was one of those heavy sighs, the kind that carries the weight of a conversation she'd been rehearsing in her head, probably while I was at work actually earning the money to pay for this theatrical production of a breakup. She fiddled with her chopsticks, doing this thing where she'd pick them up and put them down, pick them up and put them down, like she was building up courage or maybe just adding dramatic pause for effect. Noah, she started, and I knew immediately that nothing good ever follows your name said like that, with that particular tone of resignation mixed with pity. My friends are honestly embarrassed for me when I bring you around. You're not impressive. I blinked, just blinked, sitting there with a piece of expensive tuna halfway to my mouth, my brain trying to process what I'd just heard. She said it so casually, like she was ordering miso soup or commenting on the weather. Just dropped this nuclear bomb into the middle of our fancy sushi dinner like it was a normal thing to say to your husband. Not impressive. Those were the words she chose, like I was a used car she was trying to return or a restaurant that didn't live up to its Yelp reviews. For a second, I just sat there in silence, watching her avoid eye contact while pretending to be very interested in the presentation of her sashimi. Part of me wanted to laugh because this was so absurd it felt like a scene from a bad movie, the kind where you yell at the screen telling the main character to just leave. But I was the main character, and leaving felt a lot harder when you were the one actually sitting in the expensive booth with the judgmental lighting. Not impressive how? I finally asked, setting down my chopsticks very carefully because I didn't trust myself not to do something dramatic with them. Because I don't rent yachts or talk about crypto at brunch. Because I have a stable job instead of pretending to disrupt industries while actually just making PowerPoints? What exactly is the impressive criteria I'm failing here, Sabrina? She did this little shrug, this tiny movement of her shoulders that somehow conveyed both indifference and disdain in a single gesture. It was impressive, really, in an absolutely devastating way. You're nice, she said, like nice was a disease, like being a decent human being was somehow a character flaw. But stability is boring, Noah. My friends' husbands are doing things, building things, making things happen. You just exist. You go to work, come home, watch TV. Where's the ambition? Where's the excitement? And there it was, the real issue laid bare between us like the overpriced fish on our plates. I wasn't a person to her anymore. I was a reflection, and apparently I wasn't reflecting the right image. I was supposed to be her trophy, her impressive husband she could show off at networking events and brunches. But instead I was just a regular guy with a regular job who thought marriage was about partnership and love rather than social climbing and Instagram aesthetics. Stability is boring, I repeated, letting those words sink in, tasting them like the wasabi I'd accidentally eaten too much of earlier. You know what else stability did, Sabrina? Paid your rent for 8 months when you lost your job. Bought you those online courses you never finished. Funded your entire brand-building adventure that somehow never actually built anything except your follower count, which I'm pretty sure is mostly bots anyway. Her face went red, that particular shade of angry embarrassment that people get when you call out their bullshit in a public place where they can't fully lose it without causing a scene. That's not fair, she hissed, her voice low but sharp. I was investing in my future. Our future. Your future, I corrected, feeling something shift inside me, like a locked door finally clicking open. I was never part of the future you were building, Sabrina. I was just the foundation you were planning to abandon once you got high enough to forget where you started. She opened her mouth to argue, probably had some rehearsed response about how I was being unfair or not understanding her vision, but I held up my hand. I was done, so completely done that I could feel it in my bones. This crystalline clarity that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about what's really happening. You're right, I said, and I watched her face shift, probably thinking I was about to apologize or back down like I always did. Stability is boring, especially when it's paying for someone else's delusions. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to pay for my half of this incredibly overpriced fish, and then I'm going to leave. Not just this restaurant, Sabrina. All of it. I pulled out my wallet, took out my credit card, and did the mental math for exactly half the bill. Every California roll, every piece of sashimi, every fancy drink she'd ordered, I calculated my portion down to the penny. It felt petty and perfect, this small act of financial independence after years of just paying for everything without question. What are you doing? She asked, watching me count out bills with what looked like genuine confusion, like the concept of splitting a check was completely foreign to her. Maybe it was. Maybe in all her fancy brunches with all her impressive friends, nobody had ever made her pay for her own shit. I'm paying for my half, I said calmly, placing the exact amount on the table with the kind of precision I usually reserved for coding. You want it impressive? Here's something impressive. Me finally respecting myself enough to stop funding someone who doesn't respect me. I stood up, straightened my boring stable jacket, and smiled at her. Not a mean smile, not an angry smile, just a tired smile from someone who'd finally figured out the game was rigged. You know what else is impressive, Sabrina? Having the self-awareness to know when you're being used. Thanks for dinner. Well, thanks for your half of dinner. I paid for mine. She started to say something, probably some last-ditch attempt to either guilt me or rage at me, but I was already walking away, weaving through the tables of impressive couples spending impressive amounts of money to impress each other. The waiter looked confused as I passed, probably wondering if he should stop me, but I just gave him a nod and kept moving. Outside, the night air hit me like a splash of cold water, shocking and clarifying all at once. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching through the window as Sabrina sat alone in that expensive booth, probably calculating how she was going to explain this to her friends, how she was going to spin this into a story where she was the victim and I was the villain. But I didn't care anymore. For the first time in 3 years, I genuinely didn't care what she thought, what her friends thought, what any of them thought about me. I just walked away from my marriage in the middle of the fanciest sushi restaurant I'd ever been to, paid exactly my fair share, and felt absolutely zero regret. I pulled out my phone, called an Uber, and waited under the streetlight, feeling lighter than I had in months. The driver pulled up, asked me how my night was going, and I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "It's going great," I told him honestly. "I just paid for the most expensive half a sushi dinner of my life, and it was worth every penny." He looked at me like I was crazy, which was fair, but I didn't care. I just bought my freedom with some overpriced tuna and a side of self-respect, and honestly, best investment I'd ever made. Way better than funding someone else's fantasy life. Way better than being the stable, boring foundation for someone else's impressive future. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the restaurant. I just looked forward, at the road ahead, at the life I was about to reclaim. Calm. No scene. Just quiet dignity and one very generous tip for the waiter who'd had to witness that whole mess. Because that's the thing about actually having class. It's not about expensive restaurants or impressive titles or networking events. It's about knowing your worth and not accepting anything less. And my worth? Definitely more than being someone's embarrassing secret. Heartbreak sucks, and anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying or has never actually had their heart broken by someone they genuinely loved, or at least thought they loved before realizing they were actually just in love with the idea of being loved. It's a special kind of pain, the kind that makes you understand why people write terrible poetry and listen to sad music at 3 in the morning while eating ice cream directly from the container like some kind of cliché movie character. Except this was my life, not a movie, and the ice cream was store brand because I was suddenly paying all my bills alone and premium Ben & Jerry's felt like an unnecessary luxury. For exactly 72 hours, I wallowed. That's 3 full business days of operating at maybe 30% capacity, going through the motions of being a functional human while internally feeling like someone had taken a blender to my emotions and hit the frappe button. I spent those first 3 days alternating between sad playlists that Spotify had apparently been curating specifically for this exact moment in my life, whiskey that tasted like bad decisions and worse memories, and Googling things like signs your wife is secretly awful at 2 in the morning like some kind of investigative journalist discovering evidence that was painfully obvious to literally everyone except me. The search results were not encouraging. Apparently, all the signs had been there from the beginning. The constant criticism disguised as helpful suggestions, the social embarrassment, the financial imbalance, the way she treated me more like an accessory than a partner. Reddit was full of people telling stories remarkably similar to mine, and the comments were all saying the same thing. Dude, she was using you. Thanks, Reddit. Really appreciate the confirmation that I'd wasted 3 years of my life and a significant portion of my savings on someone who saw me as a stepping stone. I called in sick to work on Friday, which I never did because I was that guy, the reliable one who showed up even with a cold. But this wasn't a cold. This was my entire life imploding, and I figured I'd earned 1 mental health day to sit on my couch in sweatpants and question every decision I'd made since college. My boss was surprisingly understanding, probably because I'd never asked for anything before, and told me to take care of myself. I wanted to tell him that taking care of myself would involve time travel and a redo of the past 3 years, but instead I just said thanks and hung up. Saturday was worse because it was the weekend, and weekends were when Sabrina and I used to do things together, or more accurately, when I used to tag along to her things and try not to embarrass her. I found myself automatically thinking about what brunch spot we'd go to before remembering that I was now officially disinvited from her social calendar permanently. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty, filled with all this stuff that we'd bought together but that I'd paid for. Every piece of furniture was a reminder, every picture on the wall a lie I'd been telling myself about what we were. Sunday night, something clicked. I was lying on the couch, halfway through my third sad movie marathon, when I realized something profound and kind of obvious. I'd spent the last 72 hours mourning a relationship that had been dead for months, maybe even years. I wasn't actually sad about losing Sabrina. I was sad about losing the version of Sabrina I'd created in my head, the one who actually loved me and wanted to build a life together instead of just using me as a financial and emotional crutch while she tried to become Instagram famous. The real Sabrina, the one who told me her friends were embarrassed by me, the one who took my money and gave back criticism, the one who valued appearance over authenticity? I didn't want her back. I wanted an apology, sure, and maybe some acknowledgement that she'd treated me like garbage, but I didn't want to go back to that life where I was constantly trying to be impressive enough for someone who would never be impressed by anything real. So Monday morning, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I put myself first. I woke up early, made myself an actual breakfast instead of grabbing whatever was quick, and sent an email to my boss asking about that promotion opportunity. Turns out, there was still an opening on the digital transformation team. A different position than the one I'd turned down, but similar trajectory, similar pay increase, similar opportunity to actually advance my career instead of keeping it on hold for someone else's dreams. Then I did something even more radical. I joined a gym. Not one of those fancy boutique fitness studios where Sabrina and her friends want to take mirror selfies between half-hearted yoga poses, but a real gym, the kind with actual weights, and people who grunted and sweated and didn't care if their workout clothes matched. It was glorious and intimidating and smelled vaguely like rubber and determination. The first day, I could barely bench press the bar without feeling like my arms were going to fall off, which was humbling in the best possible way. Nobody there cared that I was weak or out of shape or going through a divorce. The guy who showed me how to use the machines just nodded and said, "Everyone starts somewhere, man. Keep showing up." It was the most genuine encouragement I'd received in years, and it came from a stranger who probably forgot about me 30 seconds after our conversation ended. I kept showing up. Every morning before work, I'd drag myself to the gym, put in the work, and slowly, incrementally, started to feel like I was building something. Not just muscle, though that was happening too in a very slow and painful way, but self-respect. Every rep was proof that I could commit to something for myself, not for someone else's approval. Every morning I showed up was a middle finger to the version of me that had let someone else dictate my worth. Turns out, dumbbells don't gaslight you. They don't tell you you're not ambitious enough or that you need to be more impressive. They just sit there, waiting for you to pick them up, and when you do, they make you stronger. It was refreshingly straightforward in a way that relationships apparently weren't. Within months, I started seeing real changes. Not just physically, though I definitely developed some actual muscle definition that made buying new shirts necessary and kind of exciting. But mentally, emotionally, I was different. I slept better because I wasn't lying awake wondering why I wasn't good enough. I felt better because I was putting actual effort into taking care of myself instead of taking care of someone who didn't appreciate it. And honestly, I smelled richer, which sounds weird but is true. Confidence has a scent, and it's not expensive cologne. It's just the smell of someone who knows their worth. My boss called me into his office about 2 months after the sushi incident, and I genuinely thought I was in trouble for something because old habits die hard, and I was still operating under the assumption that authority figures were disappointed in me. Instead, he closed the door, sat down, and said, "Noah, we want you leading the new digital transformation team. The position comes with a significant raise, better benefits, and honestly, we should have promoted you a year ago." I sat there, trying to process this information, trying not to think about how a year ago I'd turned down a similar opportunity because Sabrina needed me to stay put while she built her brand. "I'd love to," I said, and meant it completely. "Can we rename it to Petty Revenge Department?" He laughed, thought I was joking, and I didn't correct him. But in my head, I was absolutely keeping that title. Every success from here on out was petty revenge against everyone who'd made me feel small, starting with myself for allowing it. The promotion meant more money, which meant I could finally start saving again instead of just covering expenses. It meant more responsibility, which turned out to be energizing instead of stressful when you actually cared about what you were doing. It meant respect from my colleagues, which felt earned rather than demanded. It meant I was building something real, something that couldn't be taken away by someone else's opinion of me. I moved out of our apartment, found a smaller place that was actually mine, decorated it with stuff I liked instead of stuff that looked good in photos. I bought a ridiculously comfortable couch that Sabrina would have hated because it wasn't aesthetic enough, and I loved every ugly, comfortable inch of it. I hung posters of things I actually enjoyed instead of the minimalist art prints that were supposed to make us look cultured. I played music too loud and left dishes in the sink occasionally, and lived like a person instead of a prop. My friends started reaching out again, the ones who drifted away during my Sabrina years, probably because they'd been waiting for me to wake up and couldn't stand to watch me sleepwalk through my own life anymore. We'd meet for actually affordable dinners and talk about real things, and nobody compared me to anyone else's husband or suggested I needed to be more impressive. They just liked me, regular me, stable, boring me, and it felt revolutionary. 3 months post-Sushi, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked that different physically, though the gym was definitely paying dividends, but because I looked happy, actually happy, not performing happiness for someone else's benefit. My eyes looked lighter, my smile looked real, and I stood up straighter because I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's disappointment anymore. I'd grieved, hit the gym, found reasons to laugh again, and somewhere in that process, I'd found myself. The version of me that existed before Sabrina, but better, stronger, wiser. The version that knew stability wasn't boring, it was valuable. The version that understood self-respect wasn't optional, it was essential. Heartbreak had sucked for exactly 72 hours. Everything after that, that was just leveling up. At a tech seminar, of all places, I met someone who would completely restore my faith in the concept that not everyone is a soul-sucking vampire disguised as a romantic partner. The seminar was one of those professional development things my company sent me to, the kind where you sit in uncomfortable conference chairs for 8 hours learning about digital trends you already knew about, drinking mediocre coffee, and pretending to take notes while actually just doodling in the margins of your notebook. I wasn't expecting anything life-changing, just some continuing education credits and maybe a free lunch if we were lucky. Her name was Zoe, and the first thing I noticed about her wasn't her face or her style, but her socks. Mismatched socks, deliberately mismatched, one with tiny astronauts and one with pizza slices, peeking out from under her jeans as she sat cross-legged in the chair next to mine during the afternoon session about user interface design. Most people at these things dressed like they were auditioning for a corporate catalog, but she was wearing a vintage band t-shirt, ripped jeans, and those ridiculous socks, looking completely comfortable in her own skin in a way that felt almost rebellious in a room full of business casual. She was a freelance designer, which I learned when the moderator made us do one of those excruciating icebreaker exercises where you turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself like you're in kindergarten instead of a professional seminar. "Hi, I'm Zoe," she said, extending her hand with a smile that seemed genuinely warm instead of professionally polite. "I design websites for small businesses and occasionally question all my life choices. How about you?" I laughed, actually laughed, which felt weird because I'd forgotten what it was like to find someone immediately funny without them trying too hard. "Noah," I said, shaking her hand. "I work in IT and definitely question my life choices, so we have that in common." Our first real conversation wasn't about status or careers or any of the impressive metrics that Sabrina and her friends would have used to evaluate someone's worth. It was about her cat's hatred for printers, which she explained in elaborate detail during the coffee break, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. Apparently, her cat, whose name was Chairman Meow because of course it was, had declared war on her home office printer and had been winning that war for approximately 6 months. "Every time I try to print something," she explained, her eyes lighting up with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for discussing much more important topics, "he just sits on top of it and glares at me like I've personally betrayed him. And if I try to move him, he does this thing where he goes completely limp, like a furry sack of potatoes, and makes these judgmental meowing sounds that I swear translate to 'how dare you.'" I was dying laughing, actually holding my sides laughing in the middle of a tech seminar coffee break, surrounded by people networking and exchanging business cards while I was hearing about a cat's vendetta against office equipment. Why does he hate it so much? I asked, genuinely invested in this story in a way I hadn't been invested in anything in months. I have no idea, Zoe said, shrugging with this helpless smile. Maybe he's anti-technology. Maybe he thinks I should be spending more time petting him instead of printing invoices. Maybe he's just an asshole. Cats are mysterious like that. Love at first hiss, I thought, and then immediately felt weird about thinking something so corny, but also kind of perfect because it was true. Not love with Zoe, not yet anyway, but love with the idea that conversations could be this easy, this genuine, this fun without any underlying competition or performance anxiety. We exchanged numbers, ostensibly to share contact information for professional networking purposes, but really because we just clicked in that rare way that makes you want to keep talking to someone even after the obligatory icebreaker time is over. We started small, which was refreshing after the intensity of my relationship with Sabrina, where everything had felt like a high-stakes performance from day one. Zoe and I went on hiking dates, actual hikes where we wore sneakers and got sweaty and talked about random things while climbing trails that had views, but not the kind of views you'd post on Instagram. We went to coffee shops, not trendy brunch spots with 2-hour waits and complicated menus, but regular coffee shops where they knew your order and the muffins were maybe a day old, but still good. We watched bad movies together, the kind of terrible action films or ridiculous comedies that Sabrina would have refused to watch because they weren't critically acclaimed or culturally significant. Zoe loved bad movies, would provide running commentary throughout, making jokes about the plot holes and cheering for the explosions like she was watching the Super Bowl. "This is cinema," she'd say completely seriously during a scene where the main character was outrunning an explosion in slow motion, and I'd crack up because she was obviously kidding but also kind of not. There were no filters with Zoe, no carefully curated version of herself that she presented to the world while being someone completely different in private. She was just herself, consistently, whether we were at a nice restaurant or eating pizza on her couch, while Chairman Meow judged us from his perch on the printer. She had opinions about things, strong opinions, but she also listened to my opinions and sometimes changed her mind or agreed to disagree without making it a referendum on my entire personality. No fake smiles, no performing for an invisible audience, no "what do you bring to the table" nonsense like I was a business proposal instead of a person. When Zoe looked at me, I got the feeling she was actually seeing me, not evaluating me against some checklist of impressive qualities or comparing me to other people's boyfriends. She liked that I was stable, called it grounded, but meant it as an actual compliment, not a polite way of saying boring. "You know what I love about you?" she said one night while we were walking back to her apartment after dinner at this tiny Thai place that had the best pad Thai I'd ever tasted and absolutely zero ambience. "You're just genuinely chill. Like, you're not trying to prove anything or be someone you're not. You're just Noah, and Noah is pretty great." I stopped walking, just stood there on the sidewalk processing what she'd said, because it was such a simple compliment, but it hit me hard. Genuinely chill. Not boring, not unambitious, not embarrassing. Just chill, just myself, and that was enough. More than enough, it was actually desirable. "You're pretty great too," I managed to say, which was inadequate, but true. She smiled, took my hand, and we kept walking, and it felt easy in a way that relationships are supposed to feel, but that I'd forgotten was possible. No anxiety about whether I was being impressive enough, no mental calculations about whether I was meeting some invisible standard, no performance reviews disguised as helpful feedback. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company, holding hands, walking down the street, being genuinely chill together. We started spending more time together, falling into this comfortable rhythm where we'd text each other random thoughts throughout the day, not curated content, but actual thoughts. She'd send me pictures of Chairman Meow doing something ridiculous. I'd send her screenshots of weird IT tickets I received. We'd make plans without overthinking them. Just want to grab dinner. Or there's a terrible monster movie playing. Want to watch it? Simple, straightforward, honest. I called her real, which became my highest compliment after years of dealing with someone who was more interested in appearance than authenticity. She was real when she was happy, real when she was frustrated, real when she was tired or silly or passionate about something. No persona, no brand, just a person living her life and inviting me to be part of it without requiring me to change who I was to fit. Together, we called my ex a cautionary tale, which we did literally one night after I'd finally told Zoe the whole story about Sabrina and the sushi incident and the years of feeling not good enough. I'd been nervous about sharing it, worried that it would make me seem pathetic or damaged or like I had baggage. But Zoe just listened, asked questions, and then said, "Wow, she sounds like a cautionary tale about what happens when someone values image over substance." A cautionary tale. I repeated, testing out the phrase, and it felt exactly right. Not a tragedy, not a failure, not even really a mistake, just a cautionary tale, a story with a lesson that I'd learned and could now move forward from. Yeah, that's exactly what she is. Well, Zoe said, raising her beer bottle in a mock toast. Here's to cautionary tales and the wisdom they provide. And to finding people who like you for who you actually are instead of who they want you to be. We clinked bottles, drank, and Chairman Meow chose that exact moment to knock something off the counter in the other room, which made us both laugh. This was my life now, I realized, sitting on a couch with a woman who wore mismatched socks and had a chaos agent of a cat, drinking beer and laughing about my past instead of being controlled by it. This was what happiness looked like when it wasn't performed or curated or filtered through someone else's expectations. I wasn't trying to be impressive, wasn't worried about being ambitious enough or confident enough or whatever enough. I was just being myself, regular Noah with his stable job and his gym routine and his appreciation for bad movies and good Thai food. And somehow, miraculously, that was exactly what Zoe wanted. Not a project to improve, not a prop for her social media, not a financial safety net or a status symbol, just me. Dating Zoe felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for 3 years, like coming home after being lost in a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. Everything was easier, lighter, more fun. We were building something together, not just her building something while I funded it, but actually together, two people contributing equally to something that belonged to both of us. And the best part? She'd never once asked me to be more impressive. Never suggested I needed to dress sharper or network better or be more like someone else. She just liked me, mismatched socks, Chairman Meow, printer wars, and all. It was revolutionary and also the most normal thing in the world, and I was finally smart enough to appreciate the difference. Karma's funny, and when I say funny, I mean absolutely hilarious in that dark, poetic justice kind of way that makes you believe the universe actually keeps receipts and occasionally calls them in with interest. It doesn't knock politely on your door and announce itself like some kind of cosmic census taker. No, karma is way more dramatic than that. It rents a Tesla, crashes it through your ex's carefully constructed illusion of success, and then posts the dashcam footage for everyone to see. Metaphorically speaking, of course, though in Sabrina's case, there was actually a Tesla involved, which made the whole thing even more perfect. I found out through my old college buddy Calvin, the same guy who tried to warn me about Sabrina years ago, but I'd been too love-drunk to listen. We'd reconnected after my divorce, started meeting up for basketball on weekends, and he'd become this unexpected source of information about what was happening in Sabrina's world. Not because he was stalking her or anything creepy, but because his girlfriend was friends with someone who knew someone who'd been at one of Sabrina's networking events. And you know how information travels through social circles like wildfire through dry grass. Dude, Calvin said one Saturday after we'd finished playing, both of us sweaty and drinking Gatorade like we were still 22 instead of pushing 30. You're not going to believe what I heard about Sabrina. He had this look on his face, the kind of expression people get when they have really good gossip and they're trying to decide if sharing it makes them a bad person or just a realistic person who understands that sometimes schadenfreude is valid. What? I asked, genuinely curious, but also trying to play it cool like I didn't care, which was partially true. I'd moved on, was happy with Zoe, had my life together in ways that Sabrina had never appreciated. But also, yeah, I wanted to know what was happening with the woman who'd told me her friends were embarrassed by me. Sue me for being human. Calvin took a long drink, building suspense like he was about to reveal the ending of a thriller movie. Remember that guy she started dating right after you split? Tyler something. The one she was posting all over social media with those captions about finding someone who matched her ambition. I nodded, remembering the posts I'd seen before I'd blocked her on everything. Tyler had looked exactly like someone Sabrina would date. Perfectly styled hair, expensive watches in every photo, always posing in front of luxury cars or high-end restaurants. The kind of guy whose entire personality was his perceived net worth. The venture capitalist, I said, using air quotes because even then I'd been skeptical about his credentials. Yeah, about that, Calvin said, grinning now like he was about to deliver the punchline to the world's best joke. Apparently, Tyler wasn't actually a venture capitalist. He was just a guy with ventures and absolutely zero capital. Like, negative capital, debt capital. I felt my eyebrows shoot up. Wait, what? Okay, so get this, Calvin continued, settling in to tell the story properly. Tyler had this whole persona, right? Talked a big game about his investment portfolio, his startup connections, his deal flow, all this finance bro nonsense. Sabrina ate it up, obviously, because he seemed exactly like the kind of impressive guy she'd always wanted. He drove a Tesla, wore designer suits, took her to all these fancy places, the whole package. Let me guess, I said, already seeing where this was going. None of it was real. Oh, it was real, Calvin corrected. It just wasn't his. The Tesla was leased, and he was 3 months behind on payments. The suits were rented from some service that lets you pretend to be rich for a monthly subscription. And those fancy dinners? He was putting them all on credit cards that were already maxed out. Dude was living a complete fantasy life funded entirely by debt and apparently other people's money. I started laughing, couldn't help it, just stood there in the parking lot of the basketball court laughing like a maniac while Calvin grinned and nodded. It gets better, he said. So Tyler starts asking Sabrina for money. Small amounts at first, couple hundred here and there for bridge funding, until his big deal closed. She lent it to him because she believed in him, believed in his vision, all that crap she used to say about ambition and building something together. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sabrina, who'd used me as her personal bank account while she built her brand, was now being used the exact same way by someone who was just better at the con than she was. How much? I asked. Thousands, Calvin said, shaking his head. He borrowed money from her, convinced her to put his expenses on her credit cards because his were temporarily frozen due to a banking error, maxed out 3 of her cards buying God knows what, probably more stuff to maintain his fake lifestyle. Then he told her about this massive deal, this huge investment opportunity that was going to pay everything back plus interest, make them both rich, set them up for life. Let me guess, I said. The big deal fell through. The big deal never existed, Calvin corrected. It was completely made up. And when Sabrina started asking questions, getting worried about the money, wanting to see contracts or meet his business partners, Tyler ghosted her. Just disappeared. Blocked her on everything. Changed his number. Probably moved to a new city to run the same scam on some other woman who values appearance over reality. I felt a weird mixture of emotions hit me all at once. Part of me felt vindicated, like the universe had just proven my point about Sabrina's terrible judgment and obsession with surface-level impressiveness. Part of me felt bad for her, because getting scammed sucks regardless of whether you kind of had it coming. And part of me, the petty part that I'm not super proud of but also not going to apologize for, felt absolutely delighted by the poetic justice of it all. That's not even all of it, Calvin continued, clearly saving the best for last. The financial disaster was just the beginning. Word got around about what happened, probably because Sabrina had been posting about Tyler constantly, and then he just vanished, and people started asking questions. Her work found out she'd been using company resources to help Tyler with his fake business stuff, emailing potential investors from her work account, that kind of thing. They fired her. They fired her? I repeated, trying to process this avalanche of karma. Immediate termination, Calvin confirmed. Something about misuse of company resources and violating their code of conduct. And here's where it gets really good. Her friends, Sarah and Jess and all those people from the brunches, the ones who were supposedly embarrassed by you, they dropped her immediately. Suddenly found new brunch buddies, stopped inviting her to things, unfollowed her on social media, the whole Mean Girls routine. I thought about those women, the ones who'd looked at me like I was an embarrassment, who'd laughed their performative laughs, and sipped their expensive cocktails and judged me for being stable and boring. Now they were doing the same thing to Sabrina, except she'd actually believed they were her friends, had probably thought their friendship was real because it looked good in photos and felt important at networking events. So she lost her job, her boyfriend, her money, and her friends. I summarized, trying to wrap my head around the complete collapse of the life she'd been so desperate to build. All in what, like 6 months? About that, Calvin said. Basically, everything she thought was impressive and important turned out to be either fake or conditional. The boyfriend was a con artist. The friends were only there for the good times. The job was contingent on her not being an idiot, and the whole lifestyle was built on credit cards and delusion. I stood there, processing this information, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, thinking about how life has this way of teaching you exactly the lessons you need to learn whether you want to learn them or not. Sabrina had wanted impressive so badly she'd fallen for the most obvious scam in the book, had traded someone real for someone fake and paid for it in every possible way. I know I should feel bad for her, I said finally, because that's what good people are supposed to say in these situations, what evolved, mature, emotionally healthy people are supposed to feel. But you don't, Calvin finished for me, grinning. Okay, maybe I smiled a little, I admitted. But just a classy smile, you know? Like a man who knows the sushi bill was the best investment he ever made. Like someone who dodged a bullet and is grateful the bullet revealed itself before doing more damage. Calvin laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. Dude, you're allowed to feel good about this. She treated you like crap, told you her friends were embarrassed by you, used your money while insulting your character. Karma didn't do anything to her that she didn't set up herself. She chose appearance over substance, chose impressive over real, and she got exactly what those choices lead to. Nothing real, nothing lasting, nothing genuine. He was right, of course. I hadn't caused any of this, hadn't wished it on her or schemed for her downfall. I just walked away, paid for my half of the sushi, and built a better life. Sabrina had done this to herself by chasing the wrong things, by valuing the wrong qualities, by treating people like accessories instead of human beings. The universe hadn't punished her. It had just given her exactly what she'd asked for. An impressive boyfriend who turned out to be as fake as her curated Instagram life. Friends who were as shallow as her values. And a career that evaporated the moment she prioritized her image over her integrity. I didn't celebrate exactly, because I'm not a monster and watching someone's life implode isn't something to throw a party about. But I did smile, a small, knowing smile, the kind of smile you get when you finally understand that the trash took itself out and saved you the trouble. The kind of smile that says I told you so without having to say it out loud. The kind of smile that comes from knowing you made the right choice even when it was hard, even when you felt like maybe you were giving up on something that could have been saved. Sabrina had lost everything she thought mattered. The impressive boyfriend, the prestigious job, the glamorous friend group, the aspirational lifestyle. But really, she'd lost those things the moment she prioritized them over everything real, over actual connection and genuine partnership and honest relationships. Tyler had just been the messenger, Karma's way of delivering the bill for years of treating people like props in her personal brand. And me? I was exactly where I was supposed to be, with someone who valued me for who I actually was, doing work I was proud of, living a life that was real instead of performed. The sushi bill had bought me freedom, and watching Sabrina's impressive life crumble just confirmed I'd made the right purchase. Karma really does keep receipts, and apparently it accepts payment in Tesla leases and maxed out credit cards. Months later, when I was firmly settled into my new life with Zoe, sleeping peacefully for the first time in years, my phone buzzed at exactly 2 in the morning with a text that made me laugh out loud in the darkness of my bedroom. Hey, been thinking about us. Classic. The late night, I miss stability message that every person who's ever been dumped for not being exciting enough eventually receives when their ex's exciting life turns to absolute garbage. It's like there's a playbook somewhere, probably sold on Amazon for $9.99, titled, How to Crawl Back When Your Choices Catch Up With You. And Sabrina had clearly purchased the audiobook version. I stared at my phone screen, watching those 3 dots appear and disappear as she typed and deleted, probably workshopping the perfect message that would make me forget she'd called me unimpressive and embarrassing. The lack of self-awareness was genuinely stunning, like Olympic-level stunning, the kind that deserves a gold medal in audacity. Then another text came through. Tyler wasn't what I thought. Can we talk? Oh, so Tyler, the fake venture capitalist with the leased Tesla and rented suits, wasn't what she thought? Shocking. Absolutely shocking that the guy who looked too good to be true turned out to be exactly that. I wanted to respond with, yeah, turns out impressive people are sometimes just impressively good at lying. But I had grown as a person, and also it was 2 in the morning, and I had work in 6 hours. I typed out LOL and then stared at it for a solid minute before deleting it. Because as satisfying as it would have been, it also would have been engaging with her, and engagement was exactly what she wanted. She wanted a response, any response, wanted to know she still had some kind of effect on me, that I was still thinking about her enough to reply even if it was just to mock her. So I did something better. I did nothing. Just put my phone face down on the nightstand, rolled over, and went back to sleep next to Zoe, who was blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding in my text messages because she was a normal person with a normal sleep schedule who didn't send desperate messages in the middle of the night. The next day, Sabrina tried calling. I watched her name flash across my screen during my lunch break, felt absolutely nothing, and let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message, which told me everything I needed to know about how serious her desire to talk actually was. If it was really important, really genuine, you leave a voicemail. You don't just call and hope the person picks up so you can wing your apology. Then her friends started the guilt-tripping campaign, which was almost more annoying than Sabrina's attempts. Sarah, one of the brunch crew who'd looked at me like I was a lost puppy at fancy people events, sent me a message. Noah, Sabrina really needs closure. You owe her that much. I read that message 3 times, each time getting more annoyed by the sheer entitlement of it. I owed her closure? I owed the woman who'd told me her friends were embarrassed by me, who'd used my money while criticizing my character, who'd dumped me for someone shinier and faker. I owed her exactly nothing, and I was pretty sure I'd already paid any debts I might have had when I covered my half of that sushi dinner. You owe her closure. No, I owed her half a sushi roll, and I already paid that. I typed back, then deleted it because engaging with her friends was even worse than engaging with her. These were the same people who dropped Sabrina the second her life stopped looking Instagram perfect, the same fake friends who judged me for being real. Their opinion on what I owed anyone was worth less than expired coupons. I blocked Sarah. Then I blocked the number Sabrina had been texting from. Then I blocked her on every social media platform I could think of, even the ones I barely used, because I was being thorough. If she wanted closure, she could write it in her diary or talk to her therapist, or maybe just accept that some chapters end without a dramatic final scene where everyone gets to say their piece. The closure she was looking for was probably an apology from me, some kind of acknowledgement that I'd been too harsh walking out of that restaurant, that I should have been more understanding of her journey, or whatever therapy speak she'd convinced herself made her the victim in this story. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction, wasn't going to rewrite history to make her feel better about her choices. The real closure was this. I'd moved on, built a better life, found someone who actually valued me, and learned that stability wasn't boring. It was the foundation everything real gets built on. Sabrina could figure out her own closure, preferably far away from my phone and my peace of mind. It happened on a Sunday morning at my favorite coffee shop, the kind of place with actually good coffee and zero pretension. Zoe and I were laughing over croissants, her telling some story about Chairman Meow's latest printer attack, when a shaky voice cut through our bubble of happiness. Noah, can we please talk? Sabrina stood there looking significantly less polished than the last time I'd seen her, designer bag replaced with something normal, confidence replaced with desperation. She launched into her rehearsed speech about how I was real, how she missed my boring stability, how Tyler had used her and she'd made mistakes. I nodded politely. That's tough. Maybe next time, try not dating PowerPoint presentations. Her face went red. You're being cruel. I smiled calmly. No, just efficient. Zoe handed me my latte and whispered, Who's this? A case study in bad decisions, I replied. Sabrina's eyes widened. Then she turned and stormed out. The cafe didn't actually applaud, but in my head they gave me a standing ovation, and honestly, that counted enough for me. Fast forward to today, and life is honestly better than I ever imagined it could be during those sad sushi dinner days. Promotion secured and crushing it at work. Side business booming because I finally had the mental energy to build something for myself. Gym gains absolutely glorious. The kind where you actually need new shirts because your old ones don't fit right anymore. Zoe and I are thriving, living that peaceful, grounded, unstoppable life that Sabrina thought was boring, but turns out is actually just called being genuinely happy. Last week, I ran into Sabrina's ex-friends at a charity event. Sarah approached with that fake smile, saying, "Wow, Noah, you're doing amazing." I smiled back, completely unbothered. Yeah, stability's really trending this year. And there she was across the room, Sabrina herself, standing in the corner pretending not to see me while I laughed with colleagues who actually respected me. For a split second, I almost felt bad. Then I remembered the sushi bill, and that feeling evaporated instantly. Now her friends watch me thrive online, while she spirals quietly offline, probably still trying to find her next impressive disaster. Because revenge isn't a slap, a post, or a dramatic speech. It's living so well your ex's Wi-Fi cries when they see your updates. My wife posted, "Some husbands think they're irreplaceable," while I was at work. I commented, "Good thing I'm not your husband anymore." Then I canceled our vacation and used the money to buy a new car. When her family started asking if I was single, she panicked. My name's Liam Torres, and let me tell you, there are exactly 3 things in this world that have consistently tried to destroy my soul. My mother-in-law's passive-aggressive holiday newsletters, the Jacksonville Jaguars' fourth-quarter defense, and the HP LaserJet 4050 printer sitting in the corner of our office like some kind of mechanical demon that feeds on human suffering and toner cartridges. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, I was engaged in my bi-weekly battle with said printer, armed with nothing but a YouTube tutorial pulled up on my phone, a screwdriver I'd borrowed from Jerry in accounting, and the kind of misplaced confidence that comes from watching exactly 4 minutes of a 14-minute repair video. The thing had been making this god-awful grinding noise since Tuesday morning, the kind of sound that makes you wonder if there's a small animal trapped inside slowly composing its final will and testament. I'd already pulled out what looked like approximately 7,000 crumpled paper jams, each one more passive-aggressive than the last, and I was currently elbow-deep in the toner cartridge compartment, trying to remember if the blue wire was supposed to be attached to the thing that looked like a tiny robot kidney or if I'd just invented a new way to get fired. My tie, the navy one with the little anchors that Sabrina bought me for our anniversary, because she said it made me look distinguished, which I'm pretty sure was code for boring, was dangling dangerously close to the printer's internal machinery, and I had a smudge of black toner on my left cheek that probably made me look like I'd lost a fight with a Xerox machine. It was 12:47 p.m., which meant I was technically 17 minutes into my lunch break, and the tuna sandwich I'd assembled that morning with what I considered to be an impressive level of culinary ambition, lettuce, tomato, and pickles, was sitting on my desk, slowly reaching that room temperature state where you start questioning your life choices. The office was in that weird midday lull where half the people were out grabbing overpriced salads they'd post on their Instagram stories, and the other half were pretending to work while actually shopping for things they didn't need on Amazon. I could hear Denise from HR on a personal call in her cubicle, discussing her daughter's volleyball tournament with the kind of intensity usually reserved for UN peace negotiations, and somewhere in the distance, someone's microwave was beeping, ignored and desperate, like a forgotten child at a grocery store. That's when my phone buzzed. Now, I should mention that I'm not one of those people who checks their phone every 30 seconds like it's a pacemaker. I'm actually pretty good about keeping it in my pocket during work hours, mostly because my job as an IT support specialist doesn't exactly scream glamorous social media presence. But something about that particular buzz felt different. You know that feeling? Like when you're walking down the stairs in the dark and you think there's one more step than there actually is, and your stomach does that weird drop thing. It was like that, but for my thumb. I wiped my hands on my khakis, because of course I was wearing khakis, because I'm apparently a Gap commercial from 2003, and pulled out my phone. The notification glowed at me with all the subtle menace of a passive-aggressive text from your mom. Instagram notification. Sabrina had posted a new photo. Sabrina. My wife. My partner. My better half. Though after what I was about to see, I was starting to think the math on that phrase needed some serious recalculating. I swiped up, and the app opened to reveal a photo that made my stomach drop faster than the Jaguars' playoff chances. There she was, my beloved wife of 6 years, looking absolutely radiant in that way that costs approximately $300 at a salon and requires the kind of natural lighting that only exists in resorts where the room service menu doesn't have prices, because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Her nails, freshly manicured in what I could only describe as divorce red, were wrapped around a champagne flute, and the caption underneath read, "Some husbands think their irreplaceable nail polish sparkles #self-love #glow-up." I almost choked on my own spit. Like, literally almost died right there in the office, which would have been a hell of a way to go. IT specialist found dead near malfunctioning printer. Tuna sandwich ruled as possible accomplice. I grabbed my sandwich, took a bite out of sheer nervous energy, and immediately regretted it, because room temperature tuna has a way of tasting like broken dreams and poor life choices. Some husbands think they're irreplaceable. I read it again, just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. You know, just to confirm that my wife had indeed decided to air our dirty laundry on a platform where her 2,847 followers. And yes, I knew the exact number because she checked it more often than I checked my bank account. Could watch our marriage implode in real time with all the entertainment value of a reality TV show, except without the commercial breaks or the possibility of being canceled. The comments were already rolling in, and they were coming fast and vicious, like piranhas who'd been starved for 3 days and just spotted a wounded tourist. Yas Queen, wrote her friend Jessica, who'd told me at our wedding that we were relationship goals. Leave the dead weight, commented someone named it Spiritual Goddess Brit, who I'm pretty sure sold essential oils and bad advice in equal measure. You deserve so much better, girl, wrote her cousin Monica, conveniently forgetting that she'd borrowed $200 from me last Christmas and still hadn't paid me back. I scrolled through the comments like I was watching my own obituary go viral, each clapping hands emoji feeling like a tiny nail in the coffin of my matrimonial dignity. And there, in the background of her photo, because of course she'd included scenic background context for her character assassination, was the resort. The same resort that I'd watched her book using our joint credit card 3 weeks ago. The same resort that cost approximately $3,000 for 4 nights. The same resort that I'd suggested we skip this year because, you know, responsible adult things like saving money and not going bankrupt, but she'd insisted we needed it for reconnection purposes. Apparently, reconnection meant post cryptic messages that make your husband look like he's auditioning for the role of human garbage in a one-man show. I set my phone down on my desk, watched it buzz approximately 14 more times with notifications that I definitely didn't want to read, and looked back at the printer, which had chosen this exact moment to start making a new noise, a sort of wheezing, dying sound that felt spiritually appropriate. The printer was giving up. Just like my marriage, apparently. I wiped a smear of mayo off my tie, because of course I had condiment stains at this moment, because the universe has a twisted sense of comedic timing, and muttered under my breath, "Okay, Beyoncé, because what else do you say when your wife decides to go full single ladies, while technically still being married?" I sat there for a solid 30 seconds, staring at the printer, then at my sandwich, then at my phone, which was still buzzing like it had developed a nervous disorder. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with their usual soul-crushing frequency, and Jerry from accounting walked by, saw my face, and immediately changed direction like he'd just spotted a crime scene. The printer wheezed one more time, and then went completely silent, which felt symbolic in a way I wasn't quite ready to unpack. And that's when it hit me. That crystalline moment of clarity that usually comes right before you either do something incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. My lunch break had just transformed from a mundane Wednesday ritual involving a mediocre sandwich and a broken printer into a full-blown plot twist, the kind where the background character suddenly realizes he's been written into someone else's story, and not in a good way. I looked at the printer, looked at my phone, looked at the half-eaten sandwich that now seemed like a metaphor for my entire life, and thought, well, this is going to be interesting. So there I was, sitting in my cubicle with a broken printer, a half-eaten sandwich that tasted like betrayal, and a phone that was lighting up like Times Square on New Year's Eve. Except instead of celebrating the arrival of a fresh start, I was watching my marriage get dragged through the digital mud by people who'd eaten my barbecue at our housewarming party. The comments on Sabrina's post kept coming, each one more enthusiastically supportive of my apparent inadequacy as a human being, and I'm not gonna lie, something inside me just snapped. Not in a dramatic, throw things across the room kind of way, but in that quiet, calculated manner where you suddenly realize you've been playing defense for way too long and it's time to take a shot. I stared at that post for what felt like an hour, but was probably closer to 45 seconds, watching her friend Ashley, who'd cried at our wedding and told me I was the luckiest man alive. Comment 3 flame emojis and the word finally in all caps, like Sabrina had just announced she'd discovered the cure for mediocre husbands. My thumb hovered over the comment box, and I could feel this weird electricity running through my entire body. The kind of feeling you get right before you do something that you absolutely know you're going to either regret or celebrate, with no middle ground whatsoever. The rational part of my brain, the part that usually stops me from buying things off late-night infomercials or responding to obvious email scams, was screaming, "Don't do it." But that voice was getting drowned out by a much louder voice that was saying, "Oh, we're absolutely doing this." I clicked on the comment box, and my fingers started moving before my brain could fully catch up with the program, typing out 7 words that would apparently become the talk of our entire suburban neighborhood for the next 72 hours minimum. Good thing I'm not your husband anymore. I read it back once, twice, 3 times. It was simple. It was clean. It was the digital equivalent of dropping a microphone and walking off stage. Except the stage was my marriage, and the microphone was my last remaining shred of giving a damn about what Sabrina's Instagram followers thought about our relationship status. My finger hovered over the post button for approximately 2 seconds, during which time I had a rapid-fire internal debate that would have made a Supreme Court justice proud, weighing the pros and cons of essentially announcing my divorce via social media comment before actually getting divorced. And then I thought about that champagne glass in her manicured hand. Thought about the $3,000 she'd dropped on a resort to find herself, or whatever. Thought about the phrase some husbands think they're irreplaceable, and I hit send. Boom. The comment posted, sitting there at the top of her feed in all its simple, devastating glory, and for exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. It was like that moment in an action movie right after the hero pulls the pin on a grenade, but before it actually explodes, where everything goes quiet, and you can hear your own heartbeat, and maybe reconsider your life choices. I sat there, staring at my phone, wondering if maybe nobody would see it, if maybe it would just get buried under the avalanche of Yas Queen comments and I could delete it and pretend this moment of temporary insanity never happened. And then all hell broke loose. My phone started buzzing. Not like normal phone buzzing, but like someone had strapped it to a paint mixer and turned that sucker up to maximum velocity. Notifications started flooding in so fast that my screen couldn't keep up, each buzz accompanied by a new comment, a new like, a new message, a new reminder that I had just essentially declared my marriage dead on a public platform where Sabrina's hairdresser, her yoga instructor, and approximately 47 people from her high school could all watch in real time. Within 2 minutes, and I know it was 2 minutes because I watched the clock on my computer screen tick forward while my phone had what can only be described as a full-blown electronic seizure. I had 63 notifications, and that number was climbing faster than my blood pressure. Jessica, the same Jessica who'd written Yas Queen approximately 4 minutes earlier, had now commented, "OMG, wait, what?" followed by 6 shocked face emojis, because apparently one shocked face wasn't sufficient to convey the magnitude of her surprise that I, boring IT specialist Liam Torres, had just pulled a power move. Ashley had written, "Is this real?" And someone I didn't even recognize with the username at Cosmic Warrior Healing had commented, "The plot twist we needed." Like my marriage was a Netflix series, and I'd just revealed I was the villain all along. My phone buzzed again, a text message this time, and I looked down to see Sabrina's sister, Diana, had sent me what can only be described as a digital panic attack. "What did you do?" With approximately 14 question marks, because apparently the standard one wasn't emphatic enough. I set my phone face down on my desk, watching it continue to vibrate like it was trying to escape, and that's when I heard the voice. "Hey, champ, you okay over there?" I looked up to see my boss, Richard, peering over the cubicle wall with the expression of a man who'd just witnessed a car accident and wasn't sure if he should call 911 or just keep driving. Richard was a decent guy, mid-50s, had been married to the same woman for 30 years, and generally approached workplace drama with the enthusiasm of someone approaching a live landmine. which is to say, carefully and from a distance. "I'm great, Richard," I said, and I honestly meant it. I felt great. I felt like I'd just woken up from one of those dreams where you're back in high school and you forgot you had a test, except in reverse. I just remembered I actually studied, aced the test, and the teacher was the one who should be worried. Just having a bit of a lunch break situation. Richard looked at me, looked at my still vibrating phone, looked at the printer which had now completely given up on life and was making a sound like a dying cat, and nodded slowly. "All right. Well, if you need anything, someone to talk to or whatever, HR has that employee assistance program." He said it the way someone might offer to help you bury a body, not enthusiastically, but with a sense of obligation. I appreciated it, honestly. "Thanks, Richard. I'm good. Just, experiencing some technical difficulties with my personal life." I gestured vaguely at my phone, which chose that exact moment to buzz approximately 7 times in rapid succession, like it was having a seizure set to dubstep. He nodded again, gave me a thumbs up that felt legally mandated, and disappeared back behind the cubicle wall. I could hear him walking away, probably planning to send a very carefully worded email to HR about the situation with Liam and IT, and I didn't even care. I picked up my phone, saw that I now had over 100 notifications, and decided that the rest of my lunch break would be better spent literally anywhere else than at my desk watching my social media reputation either implode or explode. I honestly couldn't tell which. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of pretending to work while actually watching my phone blow up with reactions that ranged from shocked to supportive to confused to what I can only describe as weirdly proud, like I'd just announced I was running for mayor on a platform of not taking anyone's crap anymore. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around and I packed up my stuff to head home, I'd received texts from people I hadn't heard from in years, including my college roommate, who just sent a gif of someone dropping a microphone and the word savage. I drove home in my practical Honda Civic that suddenly felt way too small for the energy I was carrying, and when I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Mrs. Klein standing in her front yard across the street. Mrs. Klein was approximately 73 years old, had lived in that house since dinosaurs roamed the earth, and had a surveillance network that would make the NSA jealous. She knew everything about everyone on our street, and she shared that information with the enthusiasm of a CNN breaking news alert. She was watering her flower beds, but the hose was pointed at the sidewalk and she was staring directly at me with an expression I can only describe as, "I just discovered the juiciest piece of gossip since the Henderson divorce of 2019. I got out of my car, grabbed my laptop bag, and she waved at me, not a friendly "hey neighbor" wave, but a slow, deliberate wave that said, "I know what you did, and I'm going to tell everyone at the community center during water aerobics tomorrow morning." I waved back, giving her my best, "Yes, ma'am." There's been a murder smile, because honestly, there had been. A murder of my dignity, my privacy, and possibly my marriage, all committed in the court of public opinion via Instagram comment. She nodded knowingly, turned off her hose, and went inside, probably to call her daughter and give her the full play-by-play analysis of whatever she thought was happening. I walked into my house, dropped my bag by the door, and stood in the entryway for a solid minute, listening to the silence and wondering what the hell I'd just started. That night, I sat in what Sabrina called our home office, but what was really just the spare bedroom with a desk and approximately 7,000 decorative pillows that served no functional purpose except to make sitting on the chair an Olympic-level balancing act. The house was quiet, that specific kind of quiet that happens when you're alone in a space that's supposed to have 2 people in it, where every creak of the floorboards and hum of the refrigerator sounds amplified, like the house itself is judging your life choices. Sabrina was still at the resort, probably sipping her 3rd champagne of the evening and workshopping her next cryptic Instagram caption with her life coach Chad, who I'm 90% sure was just a personal trainer who'd watched a couple of Tony Robbins videos and decided to rebrand himself as a spiritual guide. I opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles like I was about to hack into the Pentagon or something equally dramatic, and logged into our joint travel account. The one we'd opened 3 years ago when we decided we were going to be those couples who prioritized experiences over possessions, who would travel the world and collect memories instead of stuff, who would die with empty bank accounts but full photo albums. Yeah, we were idiots. The account page loaded with all the speed and enthusiasm of a DMV employee on a Friday afternoon, and when the balance finally appeared on my screen, I literally had to blink twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. $19,800. $19,800. Just sitting there, earning approximately negative interest after accounting for inflation and the slowly dying American dream. I sat back in my chair. Well, I tried to sit back, but one of those decorative pillows attacked me from behind and stared at that number. We'd been saving for our big reconnection trip to Cancun, the kind of vacation that comes with excursion packages and couples massages and those awkward dinner cruises where they make you slow dance in front of strangers while a guy with a keyboard plays Endless Love like he's being held hostage. Sabrina had been planning this trip for months, creating Pinterest boards with names like Paradise Awaits and Tropical Healing Journey, which should have been my first red flag that this vacation was less about us reconnecting and more about her finding herself, which is code for, I'm going to drink mojitos and contemplate whether I made a mistake marrying someone who thinks Olive Garden is fine dining. Reconnection. I actually laughed out loud, sitting there alone in the spare bedroom, surrounded by pillows that cost $40 each. She'd already Wi-Fi connected with half her followers, broadcast our marital issues to anyone with a smartphone and a pulse, and turned our relationship into a social media case study on what not to do when you're unhappy. And I was supposed to spend 20 grand. Well, 19.8. But who's counting? Taking her to a resort where she could post more photos with captions about self-love and empowerment while I sat in the background like a prop in her personal journey of enlightenment? I picked up my phone, opened Google, and typed car dealerships near me open late, because apparently my crisis management strategy involved vehicular purchases, which honestly seemed more therapeutic than paying some counselor $200 an hour to tell me that communication is important. 3 results popped up, and I clicked on the first one. Rodriguez Auto Sales. Open until 9 p.m., specializing in pre-owned luxury vehicles and making your dreams come true, which sounded either really promising or like a front for money laundering. But at this point, I was willing to risk it. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. Rodriguez Auto Sales. This is Tony speaking. How can I help you turn your automotive dreams into reality tonight? The guy sounded like he'd had approximately 6 espressos and a motivational speech for breakfast. I appreciated the energy. Hey Tony, I'm looking to buy a car. Tonight. Like, right now. I said it with the kind of confidence that only comes from someone who's recently nuked their marriage via Instagram comment and has absolutely nothing left to lose. My man. Tony practically shouted into the phone, and I could hear him rubbing his hands together like a cartoon villain planning something delightful. I love the energy. I love the decisiveness. What kind of timeline are we working with here? How fast can you sell me something fun? I asked, already grabbing my wallet and keys. Fun? Brother, I can have you driving off this lot in something that'll make your neighbors jealous in under an hour. What's your budget looking like? Tony was speaking at approximately 90 miles per hour, which felt appropriate given the circumstances. I looked at my laptop screen, at that $19,800 just sitting there waiting to fund a vacation that was really just an expensive backdrop for Sabrina's social media rebrand. Let's say 20 grand, give or take. Tony made a noise that can only be described as a verbal chef's kiss. Oh, we're gonna have some fun tonight. You want something practical or something that says, I just made some significant life changes and I'm feeling good about it? I laughed. Actually laughed. The first real laugh I'd had in probably 3 months. Tony, let me ask you something. You married? Divorced? He said without missing a beat. Best decision I ever made, right after buying my Camaro. Then you already know the answer. I want fun. I already married sensible. How'd that work out? I was already standing up, grabbing my jacket, feeling this weird surge of adrenaline that I'm pretty sure is what people mean when they talk about living your best life, or whatever hashtag was trending this week. My brother, Tony said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Get down here. I got exactly what you need. 45 minutes later, I was standing in the fluorescent lights of Rodriguez Auto Sales, shaking hands with Tony, who turned out to be exactly what you'd expect. Mid-30s, slicked back hair, suit that was just expensive enough to be respectable, but not so expensive that you'd trust him with your retirement fund, and the kind of smile that said he'd seen every variety of midlife crisis walk through his doors, and he was here for all of it. He led me past a row of sensible sedans, the kind of cars that scream, "I've given up on joy, but I get good gas mileage," and stopped in front of a red convertible that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that sometimes you need to make impulsive decisions that you'll either regret immediately or remember forever. 2022 model, Tony said, patting the hood like it was a prize-winning horse. Low mileage, clean title, and brother, this car has new chapter written all over it. I walked around it slowly, running my hand along the side, and something inside me just clicked. It was perfect. It was ridiculous. It was exactly the kind of car that sensible, responsible, married to Sabrina Liam would never buy, which made it exactly the kind of car that newly liberated, Instagram comment dropping Liam absolutely needed. "I'll take it," I said. Tony didn't even blink. "You don't want to test drive it? Check under the hood? Sleep on it." "Tony, I've been sleeping on my life choices for 6 years. I'm done sleeping. Let's do this." An hour later, after signing more paperwork than I did for my mortgage and listening to Tony's entire divorce story, which involved a timeshare in Boca Raton and a wife who left him for a CrossFit instructor named Derek, I was driving off the lot in my shiny red convertible with the top down, despite it being 58 degrees and kind of windy. The radio came on automatically, and I swear to God, the universe was either mocking me or cheering me on, because "I Will Survive" started playing. And if that's not the most perfectly scripted moment of divine intervention, I don't know what is. I drove home with the wind in my hair, singing along to Gloria Gaynor like I was auditioning for a one-man Broadway show about middle-aged liberation, and when I pulled into my driveway, I sat there for a minute, just looking at this beautiful, impractical, perfect machine. I named her Freedom 2.0 right there on the spot, because Freedom 1.0 was apparently my failed marriage, and this was the upgrade. I walked inside, opened my laptop, canceled the Cancun trip with 6 clicks and 0 regret, watched the refund points pile back into our account, and then ordered tacos from that place on 5th Street that makes them with the good salsa. I ate those tacos sitting on my couch, watching SportsCenter, with my car keys on the coffee table, and honestly, best decision of my entire life. I'd like to say that I spent the next morning preparing some kind of eloquent speech about personal growth and boundaries, and all that therapy talk nonsense that people use when they're trying to justify doing something impulsive, but honestly, I just drank my coffee, ate a Pop-Tart standing over the sink like a divorced dad in a sitcom, and admired my new car through the kitchen window like it was a piece of abstract art that I didn't fully understand, but definitely appreciated. Freedom 2.0 was sitting in the driveway looking absolutely magnificent in the morning sunlight, all shiny red paint and convertible top, completely unbothered by the fact that it represented the single, most financially irresponsible decision I'd made since agreeing to a destination wedding in Napa Valley, where the cheapest bottle of wine cost more than my monthly car payment. I was on my second cup of coffee, the good stuff, not the store brand I usually bought, because Sabrina said we needed to budget better, which apparently meant I drank garbage coffee, while she got monthly gel manicures that cost $80 a pop, when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of her white BMW pulling into the driveway, the engine purring with that specific German engineering hum that probably cost extra. I looked at the clock on the microwave, 9:47 a.m. She was supposed to be at the resort until Sunday, which meant either the resort had burned down, she'd run out of champagne, or someone had told her about my little automotive acquisition. I'm guessing it was option 3, because I'd posted exactly one photo on my Instagram last night. Just a casual shot of the car with the caption, "Upgrade complete automobile sparkles," and approximately 17 of her friends had already viewed it, which I knew because Instagram has that helpful little feature that tells you exactly who's stalking your profile. I heard the car door slam, not close, slam, with the kind of force that suggests the person operating the door is experiencing emotions that probably shouldn't be expressed while operating heavy machinery. Then came the heels. Oh man, the heels. Sabrina was wearing her clicking heels, the ones she reserved for job interviews, important meetings, and apparently confronting your husband about purchasing a vehicle without consulting the Joint Financial Advisory Board, which in this case was her. They clicked against the driveway pavement with the rhythm and intensity of the IRS coming to audit your last 5 years of tax returns, each click a little reminder that I was about to have a conversation I definitely wasn't prepared for. despite having had approximately 12 hours to prepare for it. I took a long sip of my coffee, set the mug down on the counter with the casual confidence of a man who'd already accepted whatever was about to happen, and walked to the front door. I opened it just as she reached the porch, and the look on her face was something that should be studied by scientists who specialize in human facial expressions, because she was simultaneously furious, confused, betrayed, and maybe just a tiny bit impressed, though she'd rather eat glass than admit that last part. "What?" she said, pointing at my car with one perfectly manicured finger. "Is that?" I looked at Freedom 2.0, then back at Sabrina, and channeled every ounce of casual energy I could muster, which was considerable given the amount of coffee I'd consumed. That's transportation. Gets me from point A to point B. Revolutionary concept, really." Her face went from normal person color to that specific shade of red that happens when someone's blood pressure is auditioning for a medical emergency. "Don't play dumb with me, Liam. That's a $20,000 car sitting in our driveway, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't consulted about this purchase." 19.8, actually, I said, because apparently I'd decided that being pedantic about the price was the hill I wanted to die on. And funny you should mention consulting, because I don't remember being consulted about that Instagram post calling me replaceable. But here we are, living in interesting times. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish trying to remember how breathing works, and then landed on, "This is about the post? Are you serious right now? You bought a car because of a social media post?" "No," I said, leaning against the doorframe with what I hoped looked like movie star casual and probably looked more like guys at Too Much Coffee tents. "I bought a car because I had $19,000 sitting in our vacation fund for a trip that you were apparently planning to take with your mother and Chad the life coach. And I figured if I'm going to spend that money, I might as well spend it on something that actually runs better than our marriage." The silence that followed was the kind of silence you could bottle and sell as a meditation aid. Even the birds stopped chirping, which felt dramatic but appropriate. Sabrina's eye twitched. Actually twitched, like her body was physically trying to process the audacity of what I'd just said. And she took a step forward, her heels clicking against the porch with the energy of someone who's about to either commit violence or file for divorce, possibly both. "You canceled our vacation?" Her voice had gone up approximately 3 octaves, reaching that pitch that only dogs and husbands in trouble can hear. "Our reconnection trip? The thing I've been planning for months." "Our vacation?" I made air quotes, which I realize is universally acknowledged as one of the most annoying gestures in human communication, but I was committed to the bid at this point. "Sabrina, you made reservations for 3 people. 3. You, your mom, and Chad. Where exactly was I supposed to fit in this reconnection? Was I going to be the guy holding the camera while you 3 did yoga on the beach and talked about manifesting abundance or whatever?" She sputtered. Actually sputtered. "My mother was coming for 2 days. 2 days. And Chad was providing complimentary life coaching sessions because he's a professional. Chad works at LA Fitness and has a certificate he printed off the internet," I said. "I've seen his LinkedIn. His previous job was selling protein powder at GNC. But sure, super professional." That's when I noticed Mrs. Klein. Beautiful, wonderful, nosy Mrs. Klein was standing in her front yard, approximately 30 feet away, holding her garden hose and pointing it at plants that had been dead since last summer. She wasn't even pretending not to listen. She was full-on staring at us like we were the season finale of her favorite show, and honestly, I respected the commitment. She caught my eye and gave me this tiny nod, the kind of nod that says, "I'm Team Liam on this one, and I'm absolutely telling everyone at the community center." I smiled at her. "Nice evening, Mrs. Klein." She waved her hose at me. "Sure is, Liam. Nice car." Sabrina whipped around to look at Mrs. Klein, then back at me, and if looks could kill, I would have been dead approximately 7 times over. "This is unbelievable. You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" I laughed, actually laughed right there on my porch. "Sabrina, you posted our marital problems on Instagram for 2,847 people to comment on. I bought a car. If we're ranking scenes on a scale of 1 to daytime talk show, you're currently winning." She crossed her arms, which is universally recognized as the physical embodiment of, "I've run out of logical arguments, but I'm still mad." "So what now? You're just going to drive around in your midlife crisis on wheels and pretend everything's fine?" "Actually, I said, pulling out my phone with the dramatic flair of someone revealing evidence in a courtroom drama. I was thinking I'd document this moment. You know, for posterity. I opened Instagram, flipped the camera to selfie mode, and positioned myself with Freedom 2.0 perfectly visible in the background, gleaming in the sunlight like it was posing for its own magazine cover. Sabrina's face appeared at the edge of the frame, looking absolutely horrified, which honestly made the shot better. I smiled, not a fake smile, but a genuine, actually happy for the first time in months smile, and snapped the photo. It was perfect. I looked good, the car looked better, and Sabrina's expression of dawning horror in the background was chef's kiss levels of cinematic timing. I typed out the caption right there, with her watching over my shoulder. New ride. New piece. Hashtag some husband subgrade. Don't you dare, she started, but my thumb was already hitting the post button, because apparently I'd decided that subtlety was for people who weren't currently having the best worst day of their lives. The post went live, and I watched the likes start rolling in immediately. 3 likes. 7 likes. 15 likes. My college buddy Marcus commented, "My man," in all caps within approximately 8 seconds, which meant he was either psychic or had nothing better to do on a Thursday morning than refresh Instagram waiting for drama. Sabrina's phone buzzed in her hand, then buzzed again, and again. It was like watching someone's phone have a mental breakdown in real time, and I absolutely knew, that her friends were seeing my post, screenshotting it, sending it to each other with commentary that probably ranged from, "Oh my God," to, "I can't believe he did that," to, "Honestly, good for him though." Her face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, anger, disbelief, and then this weird moment of what I can only describe as her soul buffering, like a computer trying to load a program it doesn't have enough memory to run. She looked at her phone, looked at me, looked at the car, looked back at her phone, and I swear I could hear the Windows error sound playing in her head. "You're unbelievable," she finally said, but there was less anger in it now and more just exhaustion. "Yeah," I agreed, pocketing my phone and taking another sip of my now cold coffee. "But at least I'm consistently unbelievable. That's called character development." She stood there for another moment, probably trying to figure out if she should say something devastating or just leave, and ultimately decided on the latter. She turned, clicked her way back to her BMW with slightly less fury than before, and drove off with the kind of tire screech that definitely left marks on the pavement. Mrs. Klein was still watching. She gave me a thumbs up. I saluted her with my coffee mug and went back inside, feeling better than I had in years. The thing about blowing up your marriage on social media is that you don't just deal with your wife's reaction. You inherit an entire extended family's worth of opinions, concerns, and weirdly inappropriate questions about your newfound single status. I learned this the hard way approximately 48 hours after the great Instagram comment incident of whatever year this was turning into, when my phone started receiving calls and texts from people who I only saw at Thanksgiving and who usually couldn't remember if I worked in IT or insurance, but suddenly had very strong feelings about my life choices. It started on Saturday morning. I was sitting on my couch in my boxers and a Jaguars t-shirt, because even in crisis I'm loyal to teams that consistently disappoint me. Eating cereal straight from the box like a college student who'd given up on adulting, when my phone rang with a number I recognized, but had successfully avoided for the better part of 3 years. Margaret, Sabrina's mother. The woman who'd spent our entire wedding reception telling anyone who would listen that her daughter could have married a doctor, but chose to follow her heart instead, which was code for, "I'm disappointed, but I'm going to smile through it, because there are photographers present." I stared at the phone, watching it vibrate on the coffee table like it was possessed, and seriously considered just letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity, that same curiosity that makes you slow down to look at car accidents even though you know it's going to be depressing, got the better of me. I picked up on the 5th ring, right before it would have gone to voicemail, because I wanted her to know I'd thought about not answering. "Hello, Margaret," I said, going for casual but probably landing somewhere around hostage reading a script. "Liam, darling." Her voice had that overly cheerful quality that rich people use when they're about to say something passive-aggressive. "How are you? We've been so worried about you." Worried? I set down my cereal box, Frosted Flakes, because I'm a man of simple pleasures and excellent taste. About me? That's interesting, because I'm doing great. Best I've felt in years, actually. But thanks for checking in. How's the timeshare in Scottsdale? There was a pause, the kind of pause that happens when someone's trying to figure out if you're being genuine or sarcastic, and they're slowly realizing it's the latter. Well, that's wonderful to hear. We just saw some concerning posts online, and you know how social media can sometimes give the wrong impression. Oh no, I interrupted, because I knew exactly where this was going and I wanted to head it off at the pass. Social media gave exactly the right impression. Your daughter posted that I was replaceable. I agreed and bought a car with our vacation money. Pretty straightforward timeline of events. No wrong impressions, no misunderstandings. Just good old-fashioned consequences. Liam, her voice dropped to that tone that mothers use when they're trying to sound understanding but are actually just disappointed. You know, Sabrina was just going through a difficult time. She was expressing herself, finding her voice. Her voice told 2,847 people that I was dead weight, Margaret. And you know what? I heard her loud and clear. Message received, 5 stars, would recommend. I was standing now, pacing around my living room in my boxers like some kind of deranged motivational speaker. So if this call is about me apologizing or taking it back or having some come-to-Jesus moment where I realize I overreacted, I'm going to save us both some time and say that's not happening. Another pause. Longer this time. I could practically hear her recalculating her approach, shifting strategies like a chess player who just realized their opponent wasn't playing checkers. Well, we just want you to know that we care about you, regardless of what happens with you and Sabrina. You're still family. That's sweet, Margaret. Really? Hey, quick question. Did you call me after Sabrina's post to make sure I was okay? Or did the family only start caring about my emotional well-being after I responded? I didn't wait for an answer because we both knew what it was. Anyway, I've got to run. Thanks for the concern. Give my regards to Gerald. I hung up before she could respond, feeling like I'd just won a debate tournament against someone who didn't realize we were debating. My phone immediately buzzed with a text message, and for a second I thought Margaret had somehow learned to text that fast, which would have been both impressive and terrifying. But no, this was from Blake, Sabrina's younger brother. The guy who'd gotten drunk at our wedding and tried to convince me to invest in his revolutionary cryptocurrency that definitely wasn't a pyramid scheme, but absolutely was a pyramid scheme. The text read, "Hey man, you single now?" Asking for my coworker. I stared at that message for a solid 30 seconds, reading it over and over, trying to figure out if this was a joke or if Blake had actually just asked if I was available on behalf of someone from his office. I texted back, "Are you seriously asking if I'm single so you can set me up with someone while I'm still technically married to your sister?" 3 dots appeared immediately, which meant Blake was typing, and I could only imagine what kind of explanation was coming. The response, I mean when the divorce goes through obviously. "She's really cool though. Works in marketing. Has a dog. Says you're cute." Man shrugging. This was insane. This was absolutely, certifiably insane. Sabrina's own brother was trying to set me up with his coworker, which meant one of 2 things. Either Blake had the social awareness of a potato, or the family was collectively panicking because they'd realized that boring, replaceable Liam might actually have been the good guy in this scenario, and now they were scrambling to stay on my good side before the divorce papers made everything official. I sat back down on the couch, scrolling through my phone, and that's when I noticed something interesting. My Instagram had gained about 200 followers in the past 3 days. 200. People I didn't know, people from Sabrina's extended network, random folks who apparently had nothing better to do than watch a marriage dissolve in real time, like it was a Netflix documentary. And the comments on my car post, the new ride, new piece, 1, were still rolling in. But what really caught my attention was who had liked it. I scrolled through the list of names and stopped on one that made me actually laugh out loud. Sabrina's cousin, Jennifer. The same Jennifer who'd given us a KitchenAid mixer for our wedding and wrote a card about building a life together and mixing up happiness. Jennifer had liked my post, had physically pressed the little heart button on a photo that was essentially me celebrating the end of her cousin's marriage. This was beautiful. This was poetry. This was exactly the kind of petty validation I didn't know I needed, but absolutely deserved. I stood up, walked over to where I'd left my keys. Right next to the collection of self-help books Sabrina had bought me over the years with titles like The Power of Listening and Embracing Your Partner's Truth, and grabbed them. Freedom 2.0 was calling to me, and I had an idea. A beautiful, Petty, absolutely perfect idea. I went outside, still in my Jaguars t-shirt, but at least having put on actual pants, and positioned myself next to my car. The sun was hitting it just right, making the red paint gleam like something from a cologne commercial where the guy drives through the desert looking pensive and expensive. I held up my phone, got the angle just right. Me looking casual, car looking incredible, suburban background suggesting I was living my best life in a zip code where people actually mowed their lawns, and took the shot. The photo was perfect. I looked happy. Actually happy. Not that fake happy you do in family photos where everyone's smiling, but secretly planning their escape routes. I opened Instagram, uploaded the photo, and typed out a caption that I knew would either get me blocked by half of Sabrina's family or make me a legend in the passive-aggressive social media hall of fame. Applications now open. Memo sparkles. Posted. No hesitation. No second-guessing. Just pure, unfiltered confidence from a man who'd apparently turned a personal crisis into a personal brand. The likes started rolling in immediately. My buddy Marcus commented, "King," with about 15 fire emojis. Neil from the Diner Intervention wrote, "Save some confidence for the rest of us." Some random person I'd gone to high school with and hadn't spoken to in 15 years commented, "Living your best life, I see." Clapping hands. And then my phone started ringing. Sabrina. I declined the call. It rang again. Sabrina. Declined. Third time. Fourth time. Fifth time. She called me 5 times in approximately 3 minutes, which meant she'd either seen my post or someone had sent it to her, probably with a screenshot and a text that said, "OMG, did you see what Liam posted?" I didn't answer. Not because I was scared or avoiding confrontation, but because I was busy watching my phone light up with notifications, watching my followers increase, watching what used to be my quiet, boring life turn into something that people apparently found entertaining enough to follow. Mrs. Klein from across the street had somehow found my Instagram and liked the post. Even Jerry from accounting. Jerry, who I'd previously thought didn't know how to use a smartphone, had left a comment that just said nice. I sat on my front steps, phone in hand, watching the digital chaos unfold, and thought about how 3 days ago I'd been eating a tuna sandwich in a cubicle while my marriage fell apart, and now I was apparently the most interesting person in my zip code. Sabrina called again. I sent it to voicemail and ordered pizza, because if your wife's calling you 5 times while you're posting thirst traps with your new car, you've earned the right to eat an entire large pepperoni by yourself while watching college football. The text came through on Monday evening, right as I was contemplating whether eating leftover pizza for the 4th consecutive meal constituted a cry for help or just peak bachelor efficiency. It was from Sabrina, surprisingly formal and suspiciously polite. "My family wants to have dinner with both of us this Wednesday. Can you make it? 6 p.m. at my parents' place." No emojis, no passive-aggressive undertones, just straight business, which immediately made me more suspicious than if she'd sent me a novel-length essay about my character flaws. I stared at that message for a good 5 minutes, running through all the possible scenarios in my head. This was either a genuine olive branch, unlikely, or a carefully orchestrated ambush designed to make me look like the unreasonable party in front of witnesses who could later testify that they tried to help, but I was being difficult. In my experience, when your wife's family invites you to a peace dinner, what they really mean is public image management session where we all pretend to care about reconciliation while actually just trying to figure out who gets to keep the wedding gifts. I texted back, "I'll be there," because honestly, I was curious. Morbidly curious, like watching a true crime documentary where you already know how it ends, but you want to see how everyone justifies their questionable decisions along the way. Plus, Margaret was an excellent cook, and if I was going to be emotionally manipulated, I might as well get a decent meal out of it. Wednesday arrived with all the enthusiasm of a root canal appointment, and I spent an unreasonable amount of time deciding what to wear. This was psychological warfare disguised as family dinner, which meant my outfit needed to send a message. I settled on dark jeans, the good ones that actually fit properly, not the dad jeans Sabrina had been trying to get me to throw away for 2 years, a leather jacket I'd bought approximately 4 days ago, in what can only be described as a continuation of my automotive-induced confidence surge, and boots that made a satisfying sound when I walked. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself, which was either concerning or exactly the point, depending on your perspective. I showed up at Margaret and Gerald's house at 6:03 p.m., 3 minutes late, because showing up exactly on time suggested you were eager, and I was many things at this moment, but eager was not one of them. The house was one of those sprawling suburban monuments to upper-middle-class achievement, complete with a 3-car garage, professionally landscaped yard, and the kind of front door that probably cost more than my first car. I rang the doorbell, which played an elaborate chime that sounded like a church announcing the apocalypse, and waited. Gerald opened the door, Sabrina's dad, a man who'd made his fortune in commercial real estate, and had the firm handshake of someone who'd closed 1,000 deals and crushed 1,000 souls in the process. He was wearing slacks and a polo shirt, which was his version of casual, and he looked at my leather jacket with the expression of someone who'd just discovered their daughter had married a guy who might own a motorcycle or at least have opinions about motorcycles. "Liam," he said, extending his hand for the obligatory handshake that would determine my worth as a human being based on grip strength. "Good to see you, Gerald," I replied, matching his handshake with exactly the right amount of pressure. Not too weak, not trying too hard, just confident enough to remind him that I'd fixed his computer 3 Christmases ago and he'd called me a lifesaver. "Thanks for having me." He led me through the house, past the living room with furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable in equal measure, past the gallery wall of family photos where I appeared in exactly 4 frames and always looked like I'd been photoshopped in at the last minute, and into the dining room, where I immediately understood that this was not a casual family dinner. This was a production. The table was set like we were hosting a summit for minor European diplomats. The good china, the stuff that usually only came out for Thanksgiving and the occasional visit from Margaret's sister who lived in Connecticut and judged everyone, was arranged with military precision. There were cloth napkins, multiple forks per person, and a centerpiece that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. And seated around this table, like a jury waiting to deliver a verdict, were Sabrina's parents, her sister Diana, her cousin Jennifer. The same Jennifer who'd liked my Instagram post, which now felt awkward, and 2 other cousins whose names I could never remember, but who always showed up to family events and made uncomfortable small talk about property values. And there, at the head of the table opposite Gerald, sat Sabrina. She was wearing a dress, not her usual casual dinner outfit, but an actual dress, the kind she wore to job interviews and important events, and her hair was done in that way that suggested she'd spent time on it, which meant this was definitely about image management. She looked up when I walked in, and I caught something in her expression that was either vulnerability or really good acting. With Sabrina, it was increasingly hard to tell the difference. "Liam." Margaret appeared from the kitchen carrying what looked like a roast that probably cost as much as a decent used car. She was wearing her smile, the too wide one that didn't quite reach her eyes, the one that suggested she was determined to make this work through sheer force of will and expensive catering. "We're so glad you could make it. Please, sit down. Can I get you something to drink? Wine? Water? Something stronger. Water's great." "Thanks," I said, taking the empty seat next to Jennifer, who gave me a tiny smile that suggested she was Team Liam but couldn't say so out loud without causing a family incident. I nodded at her, then at Diana, who was looking at me like I was a bomb that might explode if someone said the wrong thing. Everyone sat down in that awkward silence that happens when a group of people are all thinking the same thing, but nobody wants to be the first to say it. Gerald cleared his throat, that authoritative throat clear that men of a certain age and tax bracket use to announce they're about to say something they consider profound, and raised his wine glass. "Well," he began, "I think we're all glad to be here together, despite the recent circumstances. Family is important, and we wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to talk, to reconnect, to address the elephant in the room," I suggested, because apparently I'd decided that subtlety was for people who weren't wearing leather jackets to family dinners. The table went silent. Like, so silent I could hear the air conditioning kick on in the other room. Diana's eyes went wide. One of the cousins whose name I didn't know made a small choking sound. Margaret's smile somehow got wider, which shouldn't have been physically possible, but there we were. Sabrina spoke first. "Liam's been going through something," she said, and her voice had that careful, therapeutic quality that suggested someone had coached her on how to sound understanding without actually admitting any wrongdoing. "We think he might be having a difficult time processing some changes." "Oh, I'm processing just fine," I said, reaching for the water glass Margaret had set down in front of me. In fact, I'd say my processing speed has significantly improved lately. It's like I upgraded my internal RAM or something. Everything's running much smoother now. Gerald coughed into his wine. Margaret's smile twitched. Jennifer was definitely trying not to laugh. I could see her shoulders shaking slightly. What Sabrina means, Margaret jumped in, her voice taking on that peacekeeping quality of someone trying to prevent World War III at the dinner table, is that you both have been under a lot of stress. And sometimes social media can amplify things, make them seem bigger than they are. Margaret, I interrupted, setting down my water glass with what I hoped was casual confidence and probably looked like barely controlled chaos. With all due respect, I don't think the problem is that social media made things seem bigger. I think the problem is that Sabrina used social media to announce to nearly 3,000 people that I was replaceable dead weight, and everyone's upset that I agreed with her assessment. See, when she posted about how some husbands think they're irreplaceable, she was expressing herself, finding her voice, going through enlightenment. But when I confirmed that, yeah, actually, I'm not her husband anymore, or won't be soon, suddenly I'm the one who needs to process his feelings. That's an interesting double standard. The table had gone from silent to aggressively silent, the kind of silence where you can hear people's internal screaming. Diana was staring at her plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. Gerald looked like he was trying to do complex math in his head. And Sabrina was giving me a look that could have frozen lava. You bought a car with our vacation money, she said quietly, and there was something in her voice that was either pain or performance. I genuinely couldn't tell anymore. I did, I agreed cheerfully. Gorgeous car too. Runs beautifully. And you know what? Your enlightenment came with hashtags and champagne. Mine came with horsepower and actual peace. Different paths to the same destination, really. Gerald coughed again, this time into his napkin, and when he looked up his face was slightly red. Son, I think what we're all trying to say is, don't worry, sir. I cut him off with a grin that felt dangerous and liberating in equal measure. I upgraded to a quieter engine and a louder life. Best trade I ever made. Under the table, Sabrina kicked me. Actually kicked me, her heel connecting with my shin with enough force to suggest she'd been practicing. I winked at her, which in retrospect was probably not the smartest move, but felt absolutely worth it in the moment. Dinner proceeded in what can only be described as excruciating awkwardness punctuated by Margaret's determined attempts to make conversation about literally anything else. We discussed Gerald's golf game, the weather, property taxes, and Diana's new job with the kind of forced enthusiasm usually reserved for hostage videos. The food was delicious. Margaret could cook. I had to give her that. And by dessert, the table had settled into a beautifully uncomfortable silence where everyone had apparently given up on fixing anything and just wanted to survive until coffee. I left at 8:30, thanking Margaret for dinner with genuine appreciation because the food really was excellent, and walked out to my car feeling like I'd just won a debate I hadn't prepared for, but somehow nailed anyway. The thing about publicly dismantling your marriage on social media is that it apparently makes you interesting in a way that 6 years of being a stable, employed, reasonably hygienic husband never did. I discovered this exactly 1 week after the family dinner from hell, when I walked into my office break room to grab my sad desk lunch from the communal fridge and overheard Denise from HR telling someone on the phone that Liam from IT is going through a whole thing, and honestly, it's kind of inspiring. Inspiring. Me. The guy who'd spent the last 6 years being so unremarkable that people regularly forgot my name at company events and just called me the printer guy. But apparently, buying a convertible and roasting your wife's Instagram post was the kind of origin story that resonated with people, because my phone had become a 24/7 notification factory. I'm talking constant buzzing, the kind of digital attention that made me wonder if this was what celebrities felt like, except instead of paparazzi, I had Karen from my old apartment complex sliding into my DMs asking if I was doing okay, followed by 3 eggplant emojis, which felt inappropriate on multiple levels, but also kind of flattering in that concerning way where you wonder about your own judgment. My Instagram following had exploded from a respectable but boring 247 followers. Mostly college friends, family members obligated to follow me, and that one bot account selling weight loss tea, to just over 1,100 people who apparently found my midlife crisis more entertaining than whatever Netflix was offering this month. And these weren't just random spam accounts either. These were real people, local people, folks who lived in my zip code and shopped at the same Target and had apparently been waiting their entire lives for someone to publicly choose peace over marriage counseling. The messages started rolling in around day 3 of my newfound internet fame. First was Maya Chun, a colleague from my previous IT job who I'd worked with maybe 5 years ago and hadn't spoken to since she left to take a position at some tech startup that probably had kombucha on tap and beanbag chairs in the conference rooms. Her message was short and to the point. Dude, you're trending locally. My entire book club is talking about you. They're calling you the convertible guy. You're like a suburban legend now. I read that message 3 times, trying to figure out if she was mocking me or genuinely impressed, and eventually settled on probably both. I typed back, "Is that better or worse than being known as the guy who fixes printers?" She responded with a laughing emoji and way better. Own it. So I did. I decided right then, standing in my kitchen with leftover Chinese food and a newfound sense of purpose, that if people were going to talk about me anyway, I might as well give them something worth discussing. I joined a gym, not Planet Fitness where I'd had a membership I'd used exactly 4 times in 2 years, but a real gym, the kind where people grunted while lifting things and the personal trainers looked like they could bench press a small car. I signed up for a month, met with a trainer named Derek who had approximately 0% body fat and the enthusiasm of a golden retriever on espresso, and told him I wanted to not look like someone who spends 8 hours a day in a cubicle. Derek looked me up and down with the assessment of someone evaluating a fixer-upper house and said, "We can work with this. You've got decent bone structure. We just need to, find it." I started going to the gym at 6 a.m. before work, which was a lifestyle change so dramatic that Richard asked me if I was dying or joining a cult. Neither, I told him. Just investing in myself. He nodded like I'd said something profound instead of something I'd definitely read on an Instagram motivational account at 2 in the morning. I bought new clothes. Not a complete wardrobe overhaul, because I wasn't trying to become a different person, just a better-dressed version of the same person who'd finally figured out that wearing polo shirts from 2015 wasn't classic style, but actually just giving up. I went to an actual men's clothing store, not the clearance section at Kohl's where I usually shopped, but a real store where they had fitting rooms and employees who knew what words like inseam and break meant in a fashion context. I walked out with 3 new shirts, 2 pairs of jeans that actually fit, and the kind of confidence that comes from spending money on yourself instead of on a vacation your wife was planning to take with her life coach. The physical transformation was gradual but noticeable. After 2 weeks, my arms didn't look like they belonged to someone whose primary form of exercise was carrying printer paper from the supply closet. After 3 weeks, I could see the vague outline of muscles that had apparently been hiding under years of takeout and resignation. I posted a gym selfie. Nothing obnoxious, just me in a tank top looking slightly sweaty and significantly happier than I'd looked in any photo from the past 3 years, with the caption, "Investing in the portfolio that matters. Chart increasing flexed biceps." The post got 437 likes. 437. My previous record was maybe 60, and that was on my wedding photo where half the likes were probably just people being polite. This was different. This was people actually choosing to engage with my content, to signal their approval of my journey, to participate in what was apparently becoming the most public personal transformation since that one guy lost weight and became a trainer and got his own reality show. And that's when the really weird stuff started happening. I'd be at the grocery store, minding my own business in the produce section, trying to remember if I liked asparagus or just thought I should like asparagus because it seemed like an adult vegetable, and people would recognize me. "Hey, you're that guy? The convertible guy." A woman in her 40s with a shopping cart full of wine and frozen dinners gave me a thumbs up and said, "Good for you, honey. My ex-husband didn't have half your backbone." I ran into Tommy's wife, Lisa, at the coffee shop, and she pulled me aside like she was about to share classified information. "I just want you to know," she whispered, even though we were the only people in line. "Half the women at my Pilates class think you're a hero. The other half think you're having a breakdown. But they're all talking about you. Which half are you?" I asked, genuinely curious. She grinned. "I'm Team Hero. Also, Tommy said you offered to take the guys for a ride in your new car. When's that happening?" Even at work, things had shifted. Jerry from accounting, who'd previously only spoken to me about printer issues and occasionally the weather, stopped by my desk to tell me about his own divorce 3 years ago. "Best thing I ever did," he said, leaning against my cubicle wall with the confidence of someone who'd survived and wanted to share the wisdom. "You know what I did with my half of our savings? Bought a boat. Named her Freedom. Your car's way more practical, but same energy." We talked for 20 minutes about the psychology of post-divorce purchases and the therapeutic value of spending money on things that made you happy instead of things that kept other people from being disappointed in you. It was the longest conversation I'd ever had with Jerry, and by the end of it, I realized that my personal drama had somehow become a gateway to genuine human connection with people I'd been working alongside for years without really knowing. But the best, or possibly worst, depending on your perspective, moment came when Sabrina posted her response to my transformation. She'd been relatively quiet on social media for about a week, which should have been my first clue that she was planning something. Then, on a Thursday evening while I was meal prepping chicken and vegetables like someone who'd suddenly discovered self-care, she posted a photo of herself looking contemplative in athleisure wear with the caption, "Some people think buying things and changing their exterior will fix what's broken inside. Real growth happens internally." Folded hands sparkles #authenticity #real growth #healing journey. I saw it approximately 30 seconds after she posted it, thanks to the 3 people who immediately sent it to me with messages ranging from, "Oh," to "She's subtweeting you," to "This is better than Netflix." I sat there, looking at her post, looking at my meal prep containers arranged on my counter like I was running a small food service business, looking at my gym bag by the door, and I felt this weird calm wash over me. She wanted to make this about external versus internal change. She wanted to suggest I was broken and just covering it up with new purchases and superficial improvements. Fine, I could play that game. I commented directly on her post, which I knew would send a notification straight to her phone and probably make it vibrate with the fury of 1,000 passive-aggressive screenshots. Yeah, happiness. Turns out that's what I was fixing. Working great so far. Thanks for your concern, though. Thumbs up. I posted it and immediately went back to portioning out my grilled chicken like I hadn't just lobbed a digital grenade into her comment section. My phone started buzzing within seconds, not with angry texts from Sabrina, but with notifications that people were liking my comment, replying to my comment, screenshotting my comment, and probably sending it to their group chats with commentary about how this was the best ongoing saga their suburban lives had to offer. Within 15 minutes, my comment had 89 likes. More likes than her actual post. And then, this was the moment I knew I'd won whatever weird social media war we were fighting. Margaret, Sabrina's own mother, accidentally liked my comment. I watched it happen in real time. The notification popped up, Margaret_Patterson liked your comment. And I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen, startling my neighbor's cat who'd been sitting in the window judging my meal prep technique. The like disappeared approximately 40 seconds later, which meant Margaret had realized her mistake and scrambled to unlike it, but the damage was done. I'd seen it. More importantly, Sabrina had definitely seen it, because she called me 17 seconds after the unlike, which meant she'd been watching her post like a hawk waiting to see how I'd respond. I didn't answer. I just smiled, finished my meal prep, and posted a photo of my containers with the caption, "Sunday prep for a week of good decisions." Green salad flexed biceps. It got 312 likes. And somewhere in our shared neighborhood, I knew Sabrina was losing her mind. The thing about publicly dismantling your marriage on social media is that it apparently makes you interesting in a way that 6 years of being a stable, employed, reasonably hygienic husband never did. I discovered this exactly 1 week after the family dinner from hell, when I walked into my office break room to grab my sad desk lunch from the communal fridge and overheard Denise from HR telling someone on the phone that Liam from IT is going through a whole thing, and honestly, it's kind of inspiring. Inspiring. Me. The guy who'd spent the last 6 years being so unremarkable that people regularly forgot my name at company events and just called me the printer guy. But apparently, buying a convertible and roasting your wife's Instagram post was the kind of origin story that resonated with people, because my phone had become a 24/7 notification factory. I'm talking constant buzzing, the kind of digital attention that made me wonder if this was what celebrities felt like, Except instead of paparazzi, I had Karen from my old apartment complex sliding into my DMs asking if I was doing okay, followed by 3 eggplant emojis, which felt inappropriate on multiple levels, but also kind of flattering in that concerning way where you wonder about your own judgment. My Instagram following had exploded from a respectable but boring 247 followers, mostly college friends, family members obligated to follow me, and that one bot account selling weight loss tea, to just over 1,100 people who apparently found my midlife crisis more entertaining than whatever Netflix was offering this month. And these weren't just random spam accounts either. These were real people, local people, folks who lived in my zip code and shopped at the same Target and had apparently been waiting their entire lives for someone to publicly choose peace over marriage counseling. The messages started rolling in around day 3 of my newfound internet fame. First was Maya Chan, a colleague from my previous IT job who I'd worked with maybe 5 years ago and hadn't spoken to since she left to take a position at some tech startup that probably had kombucha on tap and beanbag chairs in the conference rooms. Her message was short and to the point. Dude, you're trending locally. My entire book club is talking about you. They're calling you the convertible guy. You're like a suburban legend now. I read that message 3 times, trying to figure out if she was mocking me or genuinely impressed, and eventually settled on probably both. I typed back, "Is that better or worse than being known as the guy who fixes printers?" She responded with a laughing emoji and way better. Own it. So I did. I decided right then, standing in my kitchen with leftover Chinese food and a newfound sense of purpose, that if people were going to talk about me anyway, I might as well give them something worth discussing. I joined a gym, not Planet Fitness where I'd had a membership I'd used exactly 4 times in 2 years, but a real gym, the kind where people grunted while lifting things and the personal trainers looked like they could bench press a small car. I signed up for a month, met with a trainer named Derek who had approximately 0% body fat and the enthusiasm of a golden retriever on espresso, and told him I wanted to not look like someone who spends 8 hours a day in a cubicle. Derek looked me up and down with the assessment of someone evaluating a fixer-upper house and said, "We can work with this. You've got decent bone structure. We just need to, find it." I started going to the gym at 6 a.m. before work, which was a lifestyle change so dramatic that Richard asked me if I was dying or joining a cult. Neither, I told him. Just investing in myself. He nodded like I'd said something profound instead of something I'd definitely read on an Instagram motivational account at 2 in the morning. I bought new clothes. Not a complete wardrobe overhaul, because I wasn't trying to become a different person, just a better-dressed version of the same person who'd finally figured out that wearing polo shirts from 2015 wasn't classic style, but actually just giving up. I went to an actual men's clothing store, not the clearance section at Kohl's where I usually shopped, but a real store where they had fitting rooms and employees who knew what words like inseam and break meant in a fashion context. I walked out with 3 new shirts, 2 pairs of jeans that actually fit, and the kind of confidence that comes from spending money on yourself instead of on a vacation your wife was planning to take with her life coach. The physical transformation was gradual but noticeable. After 2 weeks, my arms didn't look like they belonged to someone whose primary form of exercise was carrying printer paper from the supply closet. After 3 weeks, I could see the vague outline of muscles that had apparently been hiding under years of takeout and resignation. I posted a gym selfie, nothing obnoxious, just me in a tank top looking slightly sweaty and significantly happier than I'd looked in any photo from the past 3 years, with the caption, "Investing in the portfolio that matters. Chart increasing flexed biceps." The post got 437 likes. 437. My previous record was maybe 60, and that was on my wedding photo where half the likes were probably just people being polite. This was different. This was people actually choosing to engage with my content, to signal their approval of my journey, to participate in what was apparently becoming the most public personal transformation since that one guy lost weight and became a trainer and got his own reality show. And that's when the really weird stuff started happening. I'd be at the grocery store, minding my own business in the produce section, trying to remember if I liked asparagus or just thought I should like asparagus because it seemed like an adult vegetable, and people would recognize me. "Hey, you that guy? The convertible guy." A woman in her 40s with a shopping cart full of wine and frozen dinners gave me a thumbs up and said, "Good for you, honey." My ex-husband didn't have half your backbone. I ran into Tommy's wife, Lisa, at the coffee shop, and she pulled me aside like she was about to share classified information. I just want you to know, she whispered, even though we were the only people in line. Half the women at my Pilates class think you're a hero. The other half think you're having a breakdown. But they're all talking about you. Which half are you? I asked, genuinely curious. She grinned. I'm Team Hero. Also, Tommy said you offered to take the guys for a ride in your new car. When's that happening? Even at work, things had shifted. Jerry from accounting, who'd previously only spoken to me about printer issues and occasionally the weather, stopped by my desk to tell me about his own divorce 3 years ago. Best thing I ever did, he said, leaning against my cubicle wall with the confidence of someone who'd survived and wanted to share the wisdom. You know what I did with my half of our savings? Bought a boat. Named her Freedom. Your car's way more practical, but same energy. We talked for 20 minutes about the psychology of post-divorce purchases and the therapeutic value of spending money on things that made you happy instead of things that kept other people from being disappointed in you. It was the longest conversation I'd ever had with Jerry, and by the end of it, I realized that my personal drama had somehow become a gateway to genuine human connection with people I'd been working alongside for years without really knowing. But the best, or possibly worst, depending on your perspective, moment came when Sabrina posted her response to my transformation. She'd been relatively quiet on social media for about a week, which should have been my first clue that she was planning something. Then, on a Thursday evening while I was meal prepping chicken and vegetables like someone who'd suddenly discovered self-care, she posted a photo of herself looking contemplative in athleisure wear with the caption, "Some people think buying things and changing their exterior will fix what's broken inside. Real growth happens internally." Folded hands sparkles #authenticity #real growth #healing journey. I saw it approximately 30 seconds after she posted it, thanks to the 3 people who immediately sent it to me with messages ranging from, "Oh," to "She's subtweeting you," to "This is better than Netflix." I sat there, looking at her post, looking at my meal prep containers arranged on my counter like I was running a small food service business, looking at my gym bag by the door, and I felt this weird calm wash over me. She wanted to make this about external versus internal change. She wanted to suggest I was broken and just covering it up with new purchases and superficial improvements. Fine, I could play that game. I commented directly on her post, which I knew would send a notification straight to her phone and probably make it vibrate with the fury of 1,000 passive-aggressive screenshots. Yeah, happiness. Turns out that's what I was fixing. Working great so far. Thanks for your concern, though. Thumbs up. I posted it and immediately went back to portioning out my grilled chicken like I hadn't just lobbed a digital grenade into her comment section. My phone started buzzing within seconds, not with angry texts from Sabrina, but with notifications that people were liking my comment, replying to my comment, screenshotting my comment, and probably sending it to their group chats with commentary about how this was the best ongoing saga their suburban lives had to offer. Within 15 minutes, my comment had 89 likes. More likes than her actual post. And then, this was the moment I knew I'd won whatever weird social media war we were fighting. Margaret, Sabrina's own mother, accidentally liked my comment. I watched it happen in real time. The notification popped up, Margaret_Patterson liked your comment. And I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen, startling my neighbor's cat who'd been sitting in the window judging my meal prep technique. The like disappeared approximately 40 seconds later, which meant Margaret had realized her mistake and scrambled to unlike it, but the damage was done. I'd seen it. More importantly, Sabrina had definitely seen it, because she called me 17 seconds after the unlike, which meant she'd been watching her post like a hawk waiting to see how I'd respond. I didn't answer. I just smiled, finished my meal prep, and posted a photo of my containers with the caption, "Sunday prep for a week of good decisions." Green salad flexed biceps. It got 312 likes. And somewhere in our shared neighborhood, I knew Sabrina was losing her mind. The thing about publicly dismantling your marriage on social media is that it apparently makes you interesting in a way that 6 years of being a stable, employed, reasonably hygienic husband never did. I discovered this exactly 1 week after the family dinner from hell, when I walked into my office break room to grab my sad desk lunch from the communal fridge and overheard Denise from HR telling someone on the phone that Liam from IT is going through a whole thing, and honestly, it's kind of inspiring. Inspiring. Me. The guy who'd spent the last 6 years being so unremarkable that people regularly forgot my name at company events and just called me the printer guy. But apparently, buying a convertible and roasting your wife's Instagram post was the kind of origin story that resonated with people because my phone had become a 24/7 notification factory. I'm talking constant buzzing, the kind of digital attention that made me wonder if this was what celebrities felt like. Except instead of paparazzi, I had Karen from my old apartment complex sliding into my DMs asking if I was doing okay, followed by 3 eggplant emojis, which felt inappropriate on multiple levels, but also kind of flattering in that concerning way where you wonder about your own judgment. My Instagram following had exploded from a respectable but boring 247 followers, mostly college friends, family members obligated to follow me, and that one bot account selling weight loss tea, to just over 1,100 people who apparently found my midlife crisis more entertaining than whatever Netflix was offering this month. And these weren't just random spam accounts either. These were real people, local people, folks who lived in my zip code and shopped at the same Target and had apparently been waiting their entire lives for someone to publicly choose peace over marriage counseling. The messages started rolling in around day 3 of my newfound internet fame. First was Maya Chan, a colleague from my previous IT job who I'd worked with maybe 5 years ago and hadn't spoken to since she left to take a position at some tech startup that probably had kombucha on tap and beanbag chairs in the conference rooms. Her message was short and to the point. Dude, you're trending locally. My entire book club is talking about you. They're calling you the convertible guy. You're like a suburban legend now. I read that message 3 times, trying to figure out if she was mocking me or genuinely impressed, and eventually settled on probably both. I typed back, "Is that better or worse than being known as the guy who fixes printers?" She responded with a laughing emoji and way better. Own it. So I did. I decided right then, standing in my kitchen with leftover Chinese food and a newfound sense of purpose, that if people were going to talk about me anyway, I might as well give them something worth discussing. I joined a gym, not Planet Fitness where I'd had a membership I'd used exactly 4 times in 2 years, but a real gym, the kind where people grunted while lifting things and the personal trainers looked like they could bench press a small car. I signed up for a month, met with a trainer named Derek who had approximately 0% body fat and the enthusiasm of a golden retriever on espresso, and told him I wanted to not look like someone who spends 8 hours a day in a cubicle. Derek looked me up and down with the assessment of someone evaluating a fixer-upper house and said, "We can work with this. You've got decent bone structure. We just need to, find it." I started going to the gym at 6 a.m. before work, which was a lifestyle change so dramatic that Richard asked me if I was dying or joining a cult. Neither, I told him. Just investing in myself. He nodded like I'd said something profound instead of something I'd definitely read on an Instagram motivational account at 2 in the morning. I bought new clothes. Not a complete wardrobe overhaul, because I wasn't trying to become a different person, just a better-dressed version of the same person who'd finally figured out that wearing polo shirts from 2015 wasn't classic style, but actually just giving up. I went to an actual men's clothing store, not the clearance section at Kohl's where I usually shopped, but a real store where they had fitting rooms and employees who knew what words like inseam and break meant in a fashion context. I walked out with 3 new shirts, 2 pairs of jeans that actually fit, and the kind of confidence that comes from spending money on yourself instead of on a vacation your wife was planning to take with her life coach. The physical transformation was gradual but noticeable. After 2 weeks, my arms didn't look like they belonged to someone whose primary form of exercise was carrying printer paper from the supply closet. After 3 weeks, I could see the vague outline of muscles that had apparently been hiding under years of takeout and resignation. I posted a gym selfie, nothing obnoxious, just me in a tank top looking slightly sweaty and significantly happier than I'd looked in any photo from the past 3 years, with the caption, "Investing in the portfolio that matters. Chart increasing flexed biceps." The post got 437 likes. 437. My previous record was maybe 60, and that was on my wedding photo where half the likes were probably just people being polite. This was different. This was people actually choosing to engage with my content, to signal their approval of my journey, to participate in what was apparently becoming the most public personal transformation since that one guy lost weight and became a trainer and got his own reality show. And that's when the really weird stuff started happening. I'd be at the grocery store, minding my own business in the produce section, trying to remember if I liked asparagus or just thought I should like asparagus because it seemed like an adult vegetable, and people would recognize me. "Hey, you that guy? The convertible guy." A woman in her 40s with a shopping cart full of wine and frozen dinners gave me a thumbs up and said, "Good for you, honey. My ex-husband didn't have half your backbone." I ran into Tommy's wife, Lisa, at the coffee shop, and she pulled me aside like she was about to share classified information. "I just want you to know," she whispered, even though we were the only people in line. "Half the women at my Pilates class think you're a hero. The other half think you're having a breakdown. But they're all talking about you." "Which half are you?" I asked, genuinely curious. She grinned. "I'm Team Hero." "Also, Tommy said you offered to take the guys for a ride in your new car. When's that happening?" Even at work, things had shifted. Jerry from accounting, who'd previously only spoken to me about printer issues and occasionally the weather, stopped by my desk to tell me about his own divorce 3 years ago. "Best thing I ever did," he said, leaning against my cubicle wall with the confidence of someone who'd survived and wanted to share the wisdom. "You know what I did with my half of our savings? Bought a boat. Named her Freedom. Your car's way more practical, but same energy." We talked for 20 minutes about the psychology of post-divorce purchases and the therapeutic value of spending money on things that made you happy instead of things that kept other people from being disappointed in you. It was the longest conversation I'd ever had with Jerry, and by the end of it, I realized that my personal drama had somehow become a gateway to genuine human connection with people I'd been working alongside for years without really knowing. But the best, or possibly worst, depending on your perspective, moment came when Sabrina posted her response to my transformation. She'd been relatively quiet on social media for about a week, which should have been my first clue that she was planning something. Then, on a Thursday evening while I was meal prepping chicken and vegetables like someone who'd suddenly discovered self-care, she posted a photo of herself looking contemplative in athleisure wear with the caption, "Some people think buying things and changing their exterior will fix what's broken inside. Real growth happens internally." Folded hands sparkles #authenticity #real growth #healing journey. I saw it approximately 30 seconds after she posted it, thanks to the 3 people who immediately sent it to me with messages ranging from, "Oh," to "She's subtweeting you," to "This is better than Netflix." I sat there, looking at her post, looking at my meal prep containers arranged on my counter like I was running a small food service business, looking at my gym bag by the door, and I felt this weird calm wash over me. She wanted to make this about external versus internal change. She wanted to suggest I was broken and just covering it up with new purchases and superficial improvements. Fine, I could play that game. I commented directly on her post, which I knew would send a notification straight to her phone and probably make it vibrate with the fury of 1,000 passive-aggressive screenshots. Yeah, happiness. Turns out that's what I was fixing. Working great so far. Thanks for your concern, though. Thumbs up. I posted it and immediately went back to portioning out my grilled chicken like I hadn't just lobbed a digital grenade into her comment section. My phone started buzzing within seconds, not with angry texts from Sabrina, but with notifications that people were liking my comment, replying to my comment, screenshotting my comment, and probably sending it to their group chats with commentary about how this was the best ongoing saga their suburban lives had to offer. Within 15 minutes, my comment had 89 likes. More likes than her actual post. And then, this was the moment I knew I'd won whatever weird social media war we were fighting. Margaret, Sabrina's own mother, accidentally liked my comment. I watched it happen in real time. The notification popped up, Margaret_Patterson liked your comment. And I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen, startling my neighbor's cat who'd been sitting in the window judging my meal prep technique. The like disappeared approximately 40 seconds later, which meant Margaret had realized her mistake and scrambled to unlike it, but the damage was done. I'd seen it. More importantly, Sabrina had definitely seen it, because she called me 17 seconds after the unlike, which meant she'd been watching her post like a hawk waiting to see how I'd respond. I didn't answer. I just smiled, finished my meal prep, and posted a photo of my containers with the caption, "Sunday prep for a week of good decisions." Green salad flexed biceps. It got 312 likes, and somewhere in our shared neighborhood, I knew Sabrina was losing her mind. 2 weeks into my personal renaissance, which is what I'd started calling my transformation because midlife crisis sounded depressing and glow up felt like I was trying too hard to be Gen Z. I was sitting at my desk doing actual work for the first time in days when Denise from HR called my extension. Liam, you have a visitor in the lobby. Her voice had that careful, slightly concerned quality that suggested my visitor was either a process server or my wife, and honestly at this point either option felt equally plausible. Who is it? I asked, already knowing the answer based on the way my stomach had suddenly decided to audition for a gymnastics team. Sabrina, Denise said, and then added in a whisper, should I tell her you're in a meeting? I considered it for about 3 seconds, running through all the possible scenarios where hiding from my wife in my own office building wouldn't make me look like a coward. I came up empty. No, it's fine. Tell her I'll be right down. I saved my work. Actually saved it, because the last thing I needed was to lose the spreadsheet I'd been building while this conversation went sideways, and headed to the lobby, taking the stairs instead of the elevator because I needed the extra 30 seconds to mentally prepare for whatever this was going to be. When I pushed through the stairwell door, I saw her immediately. She was standing by the reception desk in jeans and a sweater, looking deliberately casual in that way that actually takes significant effort, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that probably took 20 minutes to achieve the effortless look. And here's the thing that got me. She looked fragile, vulnerable, like she'd spent the morning practicing looking sad in the mirror, perfecting the exact expression that would make me feel guilty for buying a car and having the audacity to be happy about it. Liam, she said when she saw me, and her voice was soft, almost breaking, the kind of tone that could win sympathy Oscars if the Academy had a category for best performance by a wife who regrets her Instagram caption. Can we talk? Please. I glanced at the receptionist, who was absolutely not even pretending to work anymore and was watching us like we were the midday entertainment, then back at Sabrina. Sure. Conference room B is open. We walked in silence down the hallway, past cubicles where I could feel my coworkers watching without looking, their radar finely tuned to office drama. I closed the conference room door behind us, and we stood there for a moment in that awkward space where two people who used to share a bed now couldn't figure out the appropriate physical distance for a conversation about their failing marriage. So, I said, leaning against the table with my arms crossed, going for casual but probably landing somewhere around defensive. What's this about? The car or the caption? Because I'm pretty happy with both decisions, just so we're clear. She sighed, a long, dramatic sigh that suggested she was carrying the weight of the world instead of just the consequences of her own social media choices. People keep asking if we're really over. My friends, my family, people at work. Everyone wants to know if we're getting divorced. Well, I said, examining my fingernails like they contained the secrets of the universe, that depends. Are you done auditioning replacements? Because that Instagram post made it sound like you were accepting applications for Husband 2.0, now with more emotional intelligence. Her eyes flashed with something, anger maybe, or frustration, or the realization that I wasn't going to roll over and apologize for defending myself. I made a mistake, she said quietly. The post. I was angry. I shouldn't have put our problems online like that. I actually laughed. Not a mean laugh, but a genuine, almost surprised laugh. Sabrina, you didn't put our problems online. You put my problems online. There's a difference. You made it sound like I was this terrible, replaceable husband who didn't appreciate you, and then acted shocked when I agreed with your assessment and upgraded my life accordingly. I didn't mean, she started, but I cut her off. Yeah, you did. You meant every word. You wanted validation from your followers that you were right to be unhappy, that I wasn't good enough, that you deserved better. And you know what? Maybe you do deserve better. But here's the plot twist nobody saw coming. So do I. Turns out, I'm pretty good at changing passwords, fixing printers, and oil filters. I'm a multi-talented guy. Who knew? Her phone dinged in her purse, one of those loud, obnoxious notification sounds that she'd never bothered to change. She pulled it out automatically, the way people do when their phone has become an extension of their nervous system, and I watched her face change as she read whatever message had just come through. The color drained from her cheeks, her eyes went wide, and she looked like she'd just witnessed her own social death in real time. Everything okay? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea it wasn't. She showed me the screen, And there it was, a text from her mother. Is Liam single? My friend Carol's daughter asked. She saw his Instagram and thinks he's cute. Margaret, her own mother, was fielding dating inquiries for me, from her friends' daughters, while Sabrina and I were still technically married. The universe had just delivered the most perfectly timed comedic moment possible, and I had front row seats. Sabrina's face had turned the exact color of expired milk, that grayish-white shade that suggests something has gone very wrong internally. She looked at me, looked at her phone, looked back at me, and I watched her realize that whatever control she thought she had over this situation had just evaporated like her Instagram credibility. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the champagne glass, the manicured nails, the caption about replaceable husbands, and the feeling passed. I should get back to work, I said, heading for the door. Thanks for stopping by, though. Always a pleasure. Moving out turned out to be significantly easier than I'd anticipated, mostly because I discovered that 6 years of marriage had somehow resulted in me owning approximately 7 things that I actually cared about. My laptop, my coffee maker, my collection of vintage Jaguars memorabilia that Sabrina had always hated, 3 boxes of books, my clothes, my gym bag, and obviously my dignity, which I'd recently recovered from whatever storage unit it had been languishing in for the past half-decade. Everything else, the furniture that cost too much and felt like sitting on decorative concrete, the throw pillows that served no purpose except to be moved every time you wanted to actually use the couch, the kitchen gadgets we'd received as wedding gifts and used exactly never, belonged to that other life, the one where I pretended beige was a personality trait and thought compromising meant slowly erasing yourself until you disappeared completely. I found an apartment on the north side of town, a 2-bedroom corner unit on the 3rd floor with windows that actually let in sunlight, which felt revolutionary after living in a house where Sabrina had kept the curtains perpetually drawn because natural light damages the furniture. The place was unfurnished, which meant I got to start completely fresh, build a space that reflected who I actually was instead of who I'd been pretending to be. I bought a couch, leather, comfortable, the kind you could actually sit on without worrying about ruining its resale value, from a guy on Facebook Marketplace who was also going through a divorce and threw in a coffee table for free with the kind of male solidarity that transcends economic transactions. I got a bed that didn't require 17 decorative pillows to be considered complete. I hung my Jaguars jerseys on the wall without anyone telling me it looked juvenile or asking if I was really going to display those. It was my space, decorated with my stuff, existing solely for my happiness, and it felt like I'd been living underwater for years and had finally remembered how to breathe. The apartment had a parking garage, covered, secure, with my own assigned spot, which meant Freedom 2.0 had shelter from the elements and a place of honor in my new life. I developed this habit of going down to the garage in the mornings before work, just sitting in the driver's seat with my coffee, running my hands over the steering wheel, feeling the reality of my choices settle into my bones. The car still smelled new, still gleamed under the fluorescent garage lights, still represented every decision I'd made to choose myself over the slow death of maintaining appearances. 3 weeks after moving in, I drove past our old house. Sabrina's house now, I guess, since I'd signed paperwork giving her first right of refusal on buying me out, mostly because I didn't want to deal with realtors and open houses and pretending I cared about granite countertops. Her white BMW was parked in the driveway exactly where it had always been parked. The blinds were drawn exactly like they'd always been drawn, and the whole scene looked like a photograph of a life I'd stopped living. I felt nothing looking at it. No sadness, no regret, no nostalgia for what we'd had or what we'd lost. Just this calm, neutral acknowledgement that I used to live there and now I didn't. The same way you might observe that you used to work at a job you'd quit or eat at a restaurant that had closed. It was factual, historical, past tense. Mrs. Klein was outside watering her eternally struggling flower beds, and when she saw my car, she waved with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. I rolled down my window. Convertibles make this satisfyingly easy. Just press a button and suddenly you're accessible to the world. And she shuffled over with the speed of someone who had gossip to deliver and limited time to deliver it. Liam Torres, she said, leaning against my car like we were old friends meeting at a bar, instead of neighbors having a conversation in the middle of a suburban street. I heard you got your own place. Good for you, honey. That house always felt like a museum anyway. Too many rules, not enough living, if you know what I mean. I laughed, genuinely delighted that Mrs. Klein had apparently been judging our household dynamics for years and just waiting for the right moment to share her assessment. Thanks, Mrs. Klein. I appreciate that. And that's Sabrina, she continued, because Mrs. Klein had apparently decided this was a full debriefing session. She's been moping around for weeks. Lots of her friends coming over, lots of crying on the porch, lots of staring at her phone like it's going to tell her how to fix what she broke. I don't feel bad for her, if I'm being honest. You don't air your dirty laundry on the internet and then act surprised when someone responds. You're on Instagram, Mrs. Klein? I asked, genuinely shocked that a 73-year-old woman who still used a flip phone for actual calls had somehow infiltrated social media. My granddaughter set me up last year, she said proudly. I mostly just look at recipes and cat videos, but when everyone started talking about you and Sabrina, I had to investigate. You're quite popular, you know. People think you're brave. Or having a breakdown. I offered, because I'd read enough of my comments to know the opinions were split. Same thing sometimes, she said with a shrug. Either way, you look happier. That's what matters. Now go on, get out of here. Live your life. Make some noise. That's what convertibles are for. I thanked her, rolled up my window, and drove away from that street, from that house, from that version of myself that had lived there and slowly disappeared. I got on the highway, the real highway, not the suburban side roads where you spend 20 minutes going 4 miles because of traffic lights and people who don't understand how four-way stops work. And I opened it up. Not dangerously, not recklessly, but enough to feel the engine respond, enough to feel the wind tear through my hair, enough to remember what it felt like to move forward with purpose instead of just drifting through the motions of a life someone else had designed. I had one last post planned. I'd been thinking about it all week, crafting the caption in my head during my morning workouts and evening meal prep sessions, trying to find the right balance of closure and confidence, of acknowledgement and moving forward. I pulled off at a scenic overlook about 20 miles outside town, one of those spots where the highway curves around a hill and you can see the whole valley spread out below you like a painting someone forgot to finish. The sun was setting, because apparently my life had become a movie and this was the closing scene, and the light was hitting everything just right, making the world look softer than it actually was. I got out of the car, set up my phone with the timer, and positioned myself leaning against Freedom 2.0 with the sunset and the valley in the background. I wasn't trying to look cool or posed or like I was auditioning for a car commercial. I just wanted to look like myself, like the version of myself I'd found in the wreckage of a failed marriage and a viral Instagram comment. The photo came out perfect. I was smiling, actually smiling, the kind of smile that doesn't need filters or editing because it's genuine. The car looked magnificent. The sunset looked impossible. The whole thing looked like the kind of life people dream about instead of the kind they actually live. I posted it with the caption I'd been working on. Some things are replaceable. Peace isn't. Hashtag #UpGradedNote broken. I didn't wait to watch the likes roll in. Didn't refresh obsessively to see who commented or what they said. I just put my phone in my pocket, got back in my car, and drove. The wind tearing through my hair. The engine humming underneath me. The road stretching out ahead like a promise that hadn't been broken yet. The radio shuffled to some song I didn't know but liked immediately. Something about new beginnings and second chances and all that optimistic nonsense that actually feels true when you're finally living it instead of just hoping for it. I thought about Sabrina, probably sitting in our old house with her phone, seeing my post, realizing that I wasn't coming back, that this wasn't a phase or a breakdown or a temporary rebellion. I thought about her mother accidentally liking my posts, about her brother trying to set me up with his coworker, about her whole family slowly realizing that maybe I hadn't been the problem all along. I thought about my new apartment with its sunlight and lack of decorative pillows. I thought about the gym membership I was actually using, the clothes that actually fit, the life I was building that looked nothing like the one I'd left behind. And you know what? I felt great. Not perfect, not fixed, not like all my problems had evaporated just because I'd bought a car and started posting sarcastic captions. But better, lighter, like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I'd forgotten it was there. And someone had finally told me I could put it down. Mrs. Klein had been right. Peace doesn't sound like silence. It sounds like laughter in a fast lane, like wind and engine noise, and your favorite song coming on at exactly the right moment. It sounds like freedom, which apparently comes in red and goes 0 to 60 in about the same time it takes to realize you deserve better. I hit the highway doing exactly the speed limit. Okay, maybe 5 over, and didn't look back.